The story begins in the medieval city of Belstein. There lived a man known by everyone as the Proud Old Man. He was only a first-level mage, but he constantly boasted and exaggerated his achievements. His stories were so absurd that he claimed to be a powerful mage despite his terrible personality. The protagonist often observed this strange old man from a distance. Eventually, he became the boy's magic teacher. Their relationship was simple. The old man wanted someone to listen to his exaggerated stories, while the boy wanted knowledge about how the world worked. As time passed and the seasons changed, the boy trained basic magic relentlessly. Every day he worked hard to master the flow of mana. The old man wondered whether the boy truly understood how mana functioned. One day, the boy's eyes glowed with a bright red light. He focused all his energy into his hand and cast a powerful spell that shocked his master. The attack struck a tree standing in front of them in the field. After training, the old man spoke with his apprentice. The boy always worked harder than anyone else. Because of his dedication, he became a first-level mage in only 1 year. One night at camp, the old man explained that many nobles in Belstein reached the 3rd level while still young. Someone with the boy's bloodline, however, would normally spend an entire lifetime trying to achieve the same result. The old man constantly insisted that bloodline was the most important factor in magic. Perhaps he was simply frustrated by everything he had failed to achieve. That night, the boy watched the old man sleeping beside the campfire. The next day, a heavy storm struck the camp. When the boy returned, he found his master lying on the ground covered in injuries, as if he had been severely beaten. At first, the boy assumed he had started a fight in a tavern. Later, while burying him, the young mage learned the truth. The old man had been caught trying to steal a 2nd-level magic book in the city. The guards arrested him and ultimately killed him. No one understood why a man with no apparent ambition would suddenly do such a thing. At that moment, the boy remembered his master's words. Suddenly, a system screen appeared before him. Because he was not originally from that world, he awakened a mysterious power. 4 years passed. During that time, he met Katya Flam, a 3rd-level noble mage whose family had fallen into ruin. Katya remained in Belstein and taught the boy after he joined a mercenary group. Under her guidance, he learned many things from her experience. One day, while sitting in a tavern called Tears of Beldam, Katya explained that every mage naturally wanted to advance in rank. She acknowledged his talent but warned that excessive ambition would only slow his progress. The boy promised to remember her advice. Katya then instructed him to close his eyes and sense the mana around him. He concentrated, imagining the form he wished to create. A blue aura emerged from his body as he meditated. Katya noticed both his enormous mana reserves and his exceptional control. The boy's eyes suddenly shone with a purple light. His mana began to spiral out of control, surprising his teacher. Moments later, a loud explosion echoed throughout the tavern, startling everyone inside. The customers wondered what had caused the noise. Confused, the young mage stared at his hands. Katya took his hand and told him to follow her without saying a word. Outside, mercenaries searched for the source of the explosion while the two escaped through an alley. The boy asked what had happened. Katya told him to listen carefully. She explained that nobles fiercely protected their privileges, and magic was their greatest privilege. Innate magical power was considered a blessing for nobles, but commoners were viewed differently. What he had just accomplished far exceeded what anyone expected from someone of his background. Katya revealed that he had successfully cast a 2nd-level illusion spell. At only 14 years old, he had become a 2nd-level mage. Afterward, Katya continued teaching him magic and theory. A year later, she said goodbye because she had been hired as a private tutor by the Conjvester family. As a bankrupt noble, she could not refuse such an opportunity. Before leaving, she gifted him a 2nd-level spellbook. Another year passed while the boy devoted himself to studying. During that time, he mastered 2 additional 2nd-level spells. At only 16 years old, he had already become an exceptionally skilled mage and had no intention of stopping his growth. One day, he asked what mission his mercenary group had finally obtained. His superior explained that it came from the powerful Double House. The young mage became suspicious and wondered why such an influential noble family would seek them out. His leader dismissed the concern, saying the nobles spent gold freely and that the mission could help them build valuable connections. The boy then asked what the job involved. According to the leader, they only needed to eliminate a few weak monsters. The explanation sounded suspicious. Believing that a noble house would never hire mercenaries for such a simple task, the boy immediately refused. He stated that he would not accept missions that seemed suspicious. His leader argued that they needed a mage and that mages were rare. The boy replied that a mage would not be necessary for such an easy hunt and refused to get involved. In response, his leader offered him a gold coin as an advance payment. The young mage looked at the coin in his hand and began reconsidering the offer. Sometime later, he met the client, a strange nobleman wearing a monocle. Accompanying him were a kind-looking older woman and a mysterious young woman whose face was hidden beneath a hood. The mercenary leader told the boy to greet the clients, but he remained silent. The nobleman was annoyed that a child had been assigned to the mission. The leader defended him, claiming he was the most capable mage he knew. Even so, the noble insisted that the task was no place for a mere boy. He then whispered something to his companion before the 3 clients prepared to leave the tavern. Before they departed, the hooded young woman called the boy by name and asked to speak with him. Soon after, they traveled by carriage to begin the mission. During the operation, desperation, the boy attacked a goblin with magic. His eyes glowed with intense red power as he fought. Moving swiftly, he cut one goblin in half with his sword. Another tried to stab him from behind with a small dagger, but he grabbed the creature by the neck and killed it effortlessly. Moments later, a group of enraged goblins surrounded him. The young mage turned to the nobleman and calmly announced that the job was finished. The nobleman and his companions watched the battlefield in amazement. The hooded girl commented on how quickly he had handled everything. Back at the tavern, the leader asked how the mission had gone. A blonde mercenary suddenly climbed onto a table and angrily shouted at the boy. Although her leader tried to stop her, she continued accusing him of becoming a noble's lapdog. She demanded to know how much money he had received to throw away his pride. The leader revealed that the payment was 1 silver coin per year. He grinned while waiting for her reaction. The blonde mercenary froze in shock before her eyes filled with greed. She immediately begged for the chance to serve nobles herself. Later that night, the leader and the boy discussed the mission. The blonde mercenary was unconscious on a table after drinking too much. The boy explained that he had eliminated the goblins and that the nobles clearly had money. However, he also revealed that all three had lied about their true identities. His leader was surprised and asked if he was certain. The boy explained that the old man lacked the bearing of a noble official, while the woman claiming to be a servant had hands far too clean for such work. Before he could comment on the young woman, his leader interrupted him. The boy fell silent and stared at him with serious red eyes. His leader reminded him that mercenaries only completed jobs and collected payment. The boy agreed, though he remained suspicious. The leader replied that survival was all that mattered in the wilderness. The next day, they returned to the Grand Duchy of Duplan. The boy reported that the goblins would not be a threat for a long time. The leader then asked about the remainder of their payment. In response, the nobleman tossed 2 gold coins toward him. The leader became excited, but the boy asked to speak with the nobleman first. The old man cleared his throat and explained that he valued the boy's abilities. He wanted to offer him another mission. Confused, the leader scratched his head. The nobleman then offered 15 gold coins for the next assignment and asked whether the boy would accept such an attractive proposal. The young mage nodded and accepted. Soon afterward, they traveled by carriage to the location of the new mission. Upon arrival, they reached the enormous estate of the Grand Duchy of Duplan. The leader was speechless at the size of the mansion. Before entering, the old man decided to introduce himself properly. He revealed that his name was Marin and that he served as the chief administrator of the ducal residence. The leader was stunned to learn the identity of the true client. The older woman introduced herself as Katerina, the head housekeeper. The leader immediately bowed and apologized for not recognizing them earlier. The boy realized their positions were far more important than he had expected. The young woman then stepped forward and slowly removed her hood. The leader watched in surprise, suspecting who she might be. As the hood came off, her long black hair flowed in the wind. The boy observed quietly, waiting for her introduction. She introduced herself as Iseline, the eldest daughter of the Duplan family. The boy was confused when he learned that she wanted him to become a tutor. They were invited into the mansion, where luxurious halls stretched before them. Inside, a young nobleman entered the room arguing with his father. The duke demanded that his son behave with more dignity. The son replied that he was not the one lacking dignity, it was his sister. He complained that she had assaulted servants and damaged property whenever she pleased. Another blonde noble told his younger brother to lower his voice, but the young man continued his complaints. The blonde brother finally raised his voice and declared that the discussion was over. Although irritated, the younger brother argued that even if Diela was beyond saving, they still had Iseline. He insisted that sending Diela away would benefit everyone. The duke immediately intervened, stating that his son had no authority to decide his sister's future. The son replied that he had already ordered the butler to investigate nearby convents. Enraged, the duke grabbed him by the hair and slammed his head onto the table. He repeated that the decision was not his son's to make. The young noble, pinned against the table, replied that the duke would eventually have to choose. The duke stared at him with a cold expression that silenced the room. At that moment, Iseline and the boy entered. She asked whether he had ever heard of her sister Diela. He replied that he had, but that she was rarely seen in public. The doors opened, drawing everyone's attention. Iseline greeted her brother with a gentle smile. The blonde man smiled back and asked about her stay in Eberstein. She replied that it had been comfortable and thanked him for his concern. The blonde brother adjusted the younger man's hair and said they would speak later. The boy watched the interaction and sensed a strange atmosphere in the room. After the brothers left, only Iseline and the duke remained. The boy noticed a servant crying while being comforted by Iseline. He maintained his cold expression, carefully observing everything. The duke expressed relief that Iseline had returned safely from Eberstein. She thanked him and introduced the boy as Diela's new tutor. The duke studied the young mage thoughtfully. Afterward, Iseline excused herself and asked the boy to follow her. However, the duke requested a private conversation with him first. Confused, the boy turned back. Sunlight streamed through the large windows as the duke signed documents and spoke to him. The duke remarked that he seemed very young and asked whether he was truly only 16 years old. The boy confirmed it while maintaining his composure. The duke then asked how far his magical abilities extended. Adjusting his glasses with a faint smile, he added that the boy did not need to be modest, as humility was not always a virtue. The young mage remained silent, showing no emotion. emotion. The Duke released a powerful aura throughout the room to intimidate him. The boy bowed and apologized if he had been disrespectful. The Duke replied that he understood and that talent often led people astray. The young man interrupted him firmly, stating that he was only a mercenary. The Duke calmed down and said he would allow him to stay because it was Iseline's choice. He added that a maid would guide him through the mansion. Before leaving, the boy asked a question. Without even looking at him, the Duke told him to continue. The young mage explained that as a mercenary, he always completed his assignments. His mission from Iseline was to teach magic to Diela. The Duke wondered why he was stating the obvious. The boy then made a humble request regarding his authority as Diela's tutor. The Duke stared at him in confusion but listened. Suddenly, a plate flew across the mansion and shattered against a wall. Fragments scattered toward a maid, who shrank back in fear while repeatedly apologizing. A young girl shouted at the servant to get out of her way. The boy looked at a cup of hot tea sitting on a nearby table and recalled asking Iseline why she had chosen him. She had explained that every famous tutor had given up on Diela. His mercenary leader had once told Iseline that, although he was a mercenary, he could behave like a nobleman when necessary. Iseline had smiled and described him as kind and refined. The leader laughed and told her she still had much to learn about people. He revealed that the young mage had grown up on the streets. Iseline had been surprised to learn the truth. Now, escorted by a maid, the boy arrived at a large wooden door deep within the mansion. He hesitated briefly before knocking twice. Receiving no response, he opened the door and entered. Inside, he greeted a blonde girl formally and introduced himself as Derek. The girl invited him closer and revealed herself as Diela. Derek approached slowly. A malicious smile appeared on Diela's face. Without warning, water splashed across his face. The liquid ran down his hair and cheeks as he stood motionless. Diela smirked and mocked him. So this is the sewer rat the butler mentioned. Standing proudly atop a table, she threw more water at him and said it suited him better. Derek remained silent while the water dripped from his chin. Diela laughed and informed him that the bucket was empty. He continued staring at her with a cold expression. Surprised by his reaction, Diela tried to kick him. He caught her leg effortlessly before releasing it. The young noblewoman stomped angrily and complained that the mercenary smelled terrible. She placed her foot on his shoulder in an attempt to humiliate him and leaned forward arrogant, displaying her superiority. The scene shifted. In his office, the Duke stood before a window with a serious expression. He explained the difficult situation to the boy, who listened carefully. The Duke then asked how much authority he would require to do his job properly. Suddenly, a loud slap echoed through the room. Diela collapsed onto the floor in complete shock. Derek stood over her with a cold expression. She touched her reddened cheek, unable to believe what had happened. The young mage simply ordered her to stand up. A memory from 3 years earlier flashed through his mind. While traveling by wagon, he had asked his former teacher how to handle stubborn students. She smiled and said she would first try to understand and guide them. Derek considered that approach too idealistic and questioned it. His teacher explained that if words failed, another method was necessary. With a frightening expression, she added that fear could be an effective teacher. Back in the present, Diela remained frozen in shock. Derek warned her that he would not repeat himself and ordered her to stand. Filled with rage, she pushed herself up and swung a punch at him. "Who do you think you are?" she shouted. Derek responded with another powerful slap. Maintaining an intimidating stare, he warned her to show respect. Diela glared at him with pure hatred and began screaming for the mansion guards. The old butler rushed into the room in panic. Soon after, the blonde noble brother stormed in and grabbed Derek by the shoulders. The mercenary remained calm and produced a rolled document. He explained that the Duke had granted him full authority over Diela's education. The butler adjusted his monocle and read the document in disbelief. Realizing nobody would help her, Diela fell silent. Night arrived, and the moon illuminated the vast mansion. The dark-haired brother tried to calm the blonde noble, pulling him back. The blonde man refused to listen and demanded to know how a mercenary could be allowed to do such a thing. Derek sat calmly, holding a book. The noble attempted to attack him, but his brother restrained him. The young mage simply reminded them that everything had been authorized by the Duke himself. The older brother told the blonde noble that Derek was their elder sister's guest. Eventually, the blonde noble calmed down and ordered Derek to follow him. The older brother placed a hand on the mage's shoulder and assured him that he would be safe. Derek nodded slightly and followed the noble through the corridor while the other brother watched. The scene shifted to a small girl sitting alone in the darkness, holding a doll with an innocent smile. The two young men stopped before a set of double doors and entered. The blonde noble explained that the room had once belonged to Diela, but had long been abandoned. The mage approached a painting and studied the landscape depicted on the canvas. The noble remembered that Diela had once loved drawing and proudly showed her artwork to everyone around her. The man explains that the young girl could never finish a painting, always leaving them incomplete. The mercenary apologizes for acting emotionally, but the noble tells him to forget about it. Looking at the paintings scattered on the floor, the young man asks why he was brought there. With a saddened expression, the blonde noble reveals that his sister was not a bad person until she became obsessed with their bloodline. The mage listens carefully while the older man admits he does not understand why she changed. As the silver-haired mage examines old books, he learns that they must stop her from going to the monastery. Desperate, the blonde noble grabs the mercenary by the shoulders and begs him to save his sister. The mage raises a hand, asking for time to think. Picking up a blue notebook filled with notes, he realizes she never abandoned magic. He concludes that the books are theoretical studies focused on discipline, and the noble confirms it. The mercenary's expression turns serious, as if he has devised a plan. The scene focuses on a detailed painting of a lush green forest. Closing the notebook firmly, he makes his decision and tells the noble that he will try to help the stubborn girl. That night, the mansion is illuminated only by moonlight. The young noblewoman sleeps peacefully in her luxurious bed until a bucket of cold water is suddenly dumped on her. She wakes up screaming as the freezing water soaks her body. The mage appears holding the bucket and mocks her for sleeping while everything is in chaos. Furious and shivering, she accuses him of losing his mind, but he grabs her arm and tells her they need to leave. Ignoring her protests, he drags her through the mansion's corridors while the servants watch in shock. Under a giant full moon, they walk along a trail, leaving the mansion behind. The girl eventually trips and falls. Looking up with pure hatred, she demands to know who he thinks he is. Ignoring her anger, the mage warns that no one will hear her in the forest. With a disturbing smile, he claims he never wanted to be a teacher and actually enjoys beating nobles. Terrified, the girl stares at him as he calmly explains that becoming her instructor was only a convenient excuse. He leans closer and draws his sword, saying he enjoys hearing the screams of the wealthy. As she backs away in fear, he asks whether she thinks anyone would believe her accusations. He continues the psychological intimidation, claiming he does not care if he dies because his life has no value, and adds that her family would probably be happy to get rid of her. Her survival instincts take over, and she runs. Realizing she cannot reach the mansion across the open field, she rushes into the forest hoping to lose him. Using her knowledge of the area, she begins planning a counterattack. Suddenly, an orange glow lights up the path. A massive fireball appears, blocking her escape route. The silver-haired mage stands with a giant sphere of fire in his hands, illuminating the dark forest. Shocked, she wonders how he can cast a second-tier spell of such size. He only smiles, clearly enjoying her fear, and launches the fireball directly at her. Frozen in terror, she sees the flames reflected in her eyes. At the last moment, she throws herself to the ground. The spell explodes violently, creating a shockwave that hurls her away. Breathing heavily, she looks back in disbelief that she survived. The mage, his red eyes glowing, smirks and sarcastically claims he missed. The darkness of the forest makes the situation even more terrifying. She resumes running, exhausted but determined to survive. While jumping over a fallen tree, she stumbles and crashes face first into the ground. As she struggles to get back up, a blue magical arrow suddenly flies toward her. The glow reflects in her frightened eyes. Barely managing to react, she dodges multiple arrows that strike the ground around her. Realizing how close she came to death, she sees the silver-haired mage approaching with floating magical arrows surrounding him. He praises her evasive skills and remarks that it is hard to believe she spends all her time locked inside a mansion. Ignoring the provocation, she turns and runs again. The mercenary watches with a cynical smile, enjoying the chase. While fleeing, she wonders if escape is even possible. Desperate, she tries to come up with a plan. Meanwhile, the mage kneels beside a puddle and activates a tracking spell. Following the magical traces, he recognizes a path between the trees. Remembering the forest from her painting, he realizes she knows the area well and naturally transferred the forest's magical energy into her artwork. Intrigued by her hidden talent, he narrows his eyes. Suddenly, the girl leaps from a tree holding a stone, aiming to crush his head. However, with incredible reflexes, the warrior draws his sword in an instant. He knocks the stone away and strikes her, sending her crashing to the ground. Terrified, the girl realizes the monstrous skill of the man relentlessly pursuing her. The mercenary approaches and praises her courage for attempting a counterattack. Trembling heavily, the young noble clutches her dress in panic while struggling to catch her breath. With a cold expression, the silver-haired warrior points out that she no longer has the strength to run. He raises his magical sword toward her face and asks for her final words. To his surprise, she gives a weak smile and lets out a bitter laugh. She declares that she will never beg for forgiveness and tells him to finish it. His expression softens and he seriously asks why she is so obsessed with noble bloodlines. The question strikes deeply. Lowering her shoulders, she begins to cry and admits that without her noble status, she feels like she is nothing. Slamming her fist into the ground, she screams in frustration and pain, confessing that she always wanted to learn magic. She shouts that she worked as hard as she could to cast spells, yet failed every time. The mercenary listens silently as she pours out her emotions. Crying in the mud, she calls herself a failure and says she was never good enough. She explains that relying on her noble status was the only way she could cope with her constant disappointments. Lost and broken, she asks what she is besides a failure. The young mage remains silent as he listens to her entire confession. Then, his sword begins to glow with a powerful blue aura. Tears run down her face as she accepts her fate. Raising the blade above her head, he says he has heard enough. The girl closes her eyes, waiting for the strike. The sword swings down at incredible speed. She braces for pain, but none comes. Instead, the sound of ice echoes through the forest. The blade strikes the ground, creating massive ice crystals around her. Confused, she opens her eyes and sees herself surrounded by a prison of ice. The mercenary has trapped her without harming her. Looking at her glowing hands, she wonders if what she felt was magic. Calmly sheathing his sword, the mage bows slightly and compliments her efforts, apologizing for his harsh behavior. Still in shock, she struggles to understand what just happened. Smiling, he explains that her magic manifested successfully and that she did very well. Unable to contain herself, she breaks into tears of relief and happiness. The mercenary silently watches as she cries within the circle of ice while the full moon illuminates the quiet forest. He explains that she appears to belong to the wild school of magic. Confused, she asks what he means. The mage tells her that all schools of magic share the same foundation, but each person learns differently. When she asks how he figured it out, he reveals that he discovered it through her paintings. He explains that she naturally sensed the magical energy of nature and transferred that energy onto the canvas. The revelation leaves her speechless. The mage tells her that although she has successfully manifested magic, she still has much to learn. Starting tomorrow, he will teach her how to use it properly. In a soft voice, she calls him Derek and shyly thanks him for helping her. For a moment, the mercenary does not know how to respond. He eventually asks if they can return, and she agrees. As they leave, he compliments her sunset painting, saying she finished it well. The next morning, sunlight pours through the large window of her luxurious bedroom. The young noble wakes up feeling more energetic than usual. Raising her hand, she manages to summon a small blue magical aura. She studies it with determination, but the energy soon fades, reminding her that mastering magic will not be easy. Later, a maid walks through the corridor carrying a bucket of dirty laundry. Suddenly, the noblewoman opens her door, startling the servant. Attempting to use magic, she lifts the water from the bucket into the air. However, she immediately loses control, causing the water to spill all over her dress. The maid panics, convinced she will be blamed. The noblewoman stares at her seriously, making the servant fear the worst. The maid drops to the floor and desperately begs for forgiveness. Instead, the young noble simply tells her to be more careful next time. The servant is stunned that she was not punished. Other maids soon begin discussing how much the young noble has changed. Meanwhile, the protagonist sleeps peacefully in his room until loud knocking and shouting wake him up. Still half asleep, he rubs his eyes and wonders what is happening. Outside, the young noble demands that he teach her how to control her magic immediately. The old butler is shocked to hear that she has successfully manifested magic. The blonde girl reminds the mage that he promised to teach her today and orders him to hurry. The mage tells her to come back in the afternoon for her lesson. The butler becomes emotional after witnessing her transformation, while she smiles proudly. Unsatisfied, she continues pounding on the door and demands that he open it. She keeps shouting that she wants her lesson now, but the mage ignores her completely. The scene shifts to the mansion under the bright morning sun. As the duke walks through the halls, two maids gossip about how the young noble has not broken any dishes lately. Nearby, her older brother overhears servants discussing her use of magic. Shocked, he stops and asks them to repeat what they said. Later, the duke sits in his office writing a letter when his sons arrive and inform him that their sister has manifested magic for the first time. Relieved, the duke is happy to hear of her progress. However, the older brother warns that it is too early to draw conclusions. His younger brother becomes annoyed and insists that they should praise her achievement. Adjusting his glasses, the duke silently watches the argument. The older brother reminds everyone of the many problems she caused in the past. The duke remains quiet, listening to both sides. Later, under a bright blue sky, the young noble sits on her bed, hugging her knees and pouting. The mage approaches and asks whether something is bothering her. She turns away and insists that she is not upset, she is angry. He points out that sulking will not change anything. She stubbornly repeats that she is not sulking. The mage calmly replies that everything has its proper order and she is free to stay angry if she wants. Finally, she explodes and shouts that she is furious with him. The mercenary simply stares at her without reacting. Eventually, she gives up and admits she will settle for sulking for now. The silver-haired mage sits down to begin the lesson. He warns her not to get overly excited, speaking from experience. Standing up, she grumbles that her annoying magic teacher has finally arrived. The mage gives her a frightening look and asks whether she would prefer a less boring teaching method. Remembering the previous night, she immediately becomes nervous. Without another word, she quickly sits down and agrees to follow the normal lesson. The mage explains that they will begin by practicing magical manifestation. He tells her that the wild school is ideal for rapid growth, freedom, and personal development. The mage explains that the young noble is perfectly suited for the wild school of magic, leaving her confused. He tells her that her personality aligns naturally with that school and that she possesses real talent. The word talent echoes in her mind. Blushing, she asks if she truly has talent. When he confirms it, she immediately asks if that makes her a genius. The mage explains that talent and genius are completely different things. Outside the room, her older brother watches the lesson and wonders what will happen next. His expression clearly shows his dissatisfaction. The following following morning, sunlight floods the mansion. The young noble barges into the mage's room, complaining that she still cannot control her magic. The next day, she interrupts him during breakfast because her magical aura keeps freezing things around her. Another day passes, and she chases after him, saying that the sensation of magic feels strange. Eventually, she finds him reading beneath a tree in the estate's fields. She scolds him for not being in the annex and asks about the magic book he is reading. Calmly, he explains that the book was lent to him for study. Annoyed, she demands that he stop reading and come inspect the magic she has managed to produce. Meanwhile, her older brother stands by a window, lost in thought. A knock interrupts him, and the silver-haired mage enters the room. The noble invites him to sit and share some tea. As they talk, he asks how his sister's training is progressing. The mercenary replies that she has improved significantly but still needs time to fully master her abilities. The noble nods before mentioning that their mother will return the following week. He warns that noble society does not look kindly upon commoners holding important positions. The mage says he will keep that in mind and asks if that was the purpose of the meeting. After a brief silence, the noble continues. As the future head of the family, he says he believes in being honest with everyone. He begins reflecting on how difficult it is to understand people's hearts, but the mage interrupts and asks him to get to the point. The noble clenches his fist dramatically and finally reveals the issue. His sister no longer spends time with him and only pays attention to her tutor. The silver-haired mage responds with complete boredom. The noble fondly recalls how she used to call him an angel when they were children and asks for help winning back her affection. At that exact moment, the young noble shouts the mercenary's name from elsewhere in the mansion, proving his point. Changing the subject, the noble proudly shows something he learned to make with the servants. He presents a strange-looking cloth doll and asks whether his sister would like it. After staring at it for a moment, the mage asks if he is trying to curse someone. The noble immediately breaks into tears, declaring the mercenary completely useless for this kind of advice. The scene shifts back to the luxurious mansion. The young mage is greeted by a woman who says she has heard many things about him. She remarks that the family has finally found a capable and talented magic instructor. Introducing herself as Morella, she offers to present him properly to the family. The mage calmly replies that he does not belong to any noble house. Confused, Morella asks what he means. With a smile, he reveals that he is simply a commoner. Morella is completely shocked by the revelation. The story then jumps back 1 week earlier. Outside the same grand mansion, a young woman tells Derek that bringing him there was an excellent decision. She explains that she must leave soon and will be entrusting her younger sister to his care. The white-haired mage simply nods with a serious expression. A large man suddenly hugs him and tells him to try looking more enthusiastic. As the carriage prepares to leave, they ask him to finish his work as quickly as possible. Left alone, Derek watches the massive mansion while the carriage slowly disappears into the distance. Suddenly, the young woman remembers something important. She warns him that their mother will return the following week and apologizes for forgetting to mention it earlier. Someone beside her asks why that requires a warning. Her expression immediately changes. She describes her mother as the most intense and unpredictable person imaginable. The story returns to the present. Inside the mansion's office, Morella furiously argues with her husband. He calmly asks her to lower her voice, but she refuses. She insists that the problem is their youngest daughter, Diela. Her husband admits that he is not thrilled about hiring a commoner either, but reminds her that every noble-born tutor they hired previously gave up on the girl. Finding a qualified teacher has not been easy, and this particular instructor came highly recommended. Morella argues that certain standards should still exist for such a position. She suggests replacing the commoner with her brother, Flan. Her husband asks whether she is seriously proposing that a general abandon his duties just to become a tutor. Morella fires back that noble society is its own battlefield. According to her, a tutor serves as a reflection of the family, and employing a commoner would embarrass them. At that moment, the office door swings open. A young man named Valerian enters and asks his mother to calm down and stop arguing. Morella tells him to stay out of it because the matter is important. Moments later, another son enters and says that the real issue is whether the new teacher is qualified. Morella immediately smiles with pride upon seeing him. Calling him Hike, she listens as he explains that a commoner becoming a tutor is unusual, but not necessarily a problem. He then volunteers to personally test Derek's abilities and determine whether he is truly worthy of the position. His father immediately interrupts, explaining that Derek is not just a tutor, but a genuine and powerful mage. The young noble falls silent, considering his next move. Instead of testing the teacher, he proposes testing Derek's student instead. His blonde brother is confused and asks what kind of logic that is. Hike explains that if the teacher is truly exceptional, then his student should also show impressive results. The Duke remains silent, listening to the proposal without comment. Satisfied with his idea, Hike leaves the room determined to put his plan into action. Valerian follows him and asks why he is so eager to challenge their own sister to a magical duel. He questions whether Hike truly believes Diela has not changed. Valerian insists that she is their only sister and that it is their duty to protect her. Hike laughs mockingly at the mention of family blood. He argues that the family's bloodline will eventually destroy them and that Diela herself will bring ruin to the household. With a serious expression, Valerian asks if that is really how his brother feels. Hike Hike answers that Diela crossed every limit and should remain isolated in the annex forever. Valerian says nothing, staring at him in silence. Determined, Hike turns around and walks away without looking back. Outside, a small bird peacefully watches the activity around the enormous mansion. Suddenly, Diela bursts into Derek's room, shouting his name. Still reading, he calmly asks why she is making so much noise so early in the morning. She throws a scroll onto his desk. It contains an official notice announcing a magical duel. Diela warns him that if she loses, he will be dismissed immediately. Derek calmly points out that Hake is already a one-star mage and will not be easy to defeat. Frustrated, she yells that this is all he has to say about losing his job. The mercenary explains that he is simply a hired professional and only needs to complete the task he was paid for. He adds that his payment has already been more than sufficient. Diela is shocked and asks whether he is being serious. 1 week later, a banner bearing a giant eagle waves above a packed arena. A large crowd gathers to watch the upcoming duel. The Duke arrives alongside his wife and several influential nobles. Spotting Derek, he comments that the young mage has finally decided to show up. Derek bows respectfully before the head of the family. The Duke notices that the young man does not appear nervous at all. Taking his seat, he concludes that Derek is not someone to underestimate. Firm footsteps echo through the arena as one of the competitors enters. With his cloak flowing behind him, Hike confidently walks toward the center of the battlefield. To him, this is not a simple duel. He believes he must completely crush Diela and make her pay for her past actions. Moments later, the young blonde girl enters the arena wearing a red hood. Facing her brother, she looks determined and ready to fight. The story briefly returns to an earlier conversation. Diela asks Derek whether he truly does not care about being dismissed. He explains that her mana has stabilized and that she will soon be capable of using one-star magic herself. According to him, she inherited the blood of the Pleen family and possesses exceptional natural potential. He also explains that his school focuses more on personal study than traditional instruction. With tears in her eyes, she demands to know why he waited until now to tell her. Derek remains silent. Lowering her head, she admits that she knows she is not the easiest student to teach. Crying, she begs him to continue training her because she does not want any other teacher. With his back turned, Derek quietly listens. As he puts on his gloves, he admits that he does not know much about noble dueling customs. Then he smiles and offers to teach her how to win. He asks whether she truly wants victory. A memory flashes through her mind. People mocked her for having almost no mana. They called her a disgrace to her noble family. With tears in her eyes and anger burning inside her, she answers without hesitation. Yes, she wants to win. Back in the arena, it is announced that she is not there as Hake's sister or as the youngest daughter of the family. She stands there as someone entirely different. She is Derek's disciple and a true mage ready to fight. Above the arena, the Pleen family banner waves beneath the clear blue sky. The young mage in the red hood faces her older brother from across the battlefield. A mustached official steps forward and calls for everyone's attention. He announces that the duel will follow the same rules used in the famous Hall of Euston. Confidently, Hike declares that they can begin immediately. Diela fixes her gaze on him, her eyes filled with determination. A green protective pendant is revealed, capable of activating before a fatal injury and neutralizing dangerous magic. Watching from the sidelines, Derek notices the pendant's high mana consumption and realizes the duel will need to end quickly. In the arena, Hike raises his hand and begins casting a powerful wind spell. Diela watches the gathering currents with complete focus. Concentrating mana into his palm, Hike creates a glowing vortex. With absolute confidence, he declares that his opponent will soon return to isolation. He unleashes a massive blast of wind. The attack tears through the air and rushes directly toward Diela's chest. She does not retreat. Keeping her eyes locked on the spell, she crouches at the last second and slips beneath the wind blade. Hike is stunned that she managed to evade such a powerful attack. Irritated, he immediately launches another spell. The girl in the red hood slides across the ground and avoids it as well. Despite the pressure, she remains calm, carefully analyzing every movement her brother makes. From the audience, Derek notices that she is spending too much energy on evasive maneuvers and still lacks combat experience. Back on the battlefield, a powerful wind blade crashes into a wall of ice and shatters it. Using raw magical power, Diela raises enormous blocks of ice from the ground as a defensive barrier. Hike scoffs at the sight. To him, such a crude defense could never stop his strength. Raising his hand once more, he creates multiple glowing wind spheres around himself. Completely confident, he vows to destroy her defensive trick in a single attack. He launches all of his magical spheres at full power toward the girl's ice barrier. A flashback shows Derek explaining that mercenary battles focus only on victory. He tells Luna that even if she wins, people may still criticize her. The albino mage asks whether she is willing to use dirty tactics to secure victory. Without hesitation, she shouts that she accepts the plan. Back in the present, the girl in the red hood stares at her opponent with an unwavering gaze. Powerful wind blasts rain down from above as she sprints across the arena searching for cover. Once again, she ducks beneath a deadly wind blade by the smallest margin. The narrator explains that skilled fighters can win even against opponents with far greater magical power. As the irritated noble prepares another attack, book. It is noted that mercenaries fight to kill, not for honor. Using ice magic beneath her feet, Luna slides across the battlefield. Controlling the terrain is just as important as casting spells. She abruptly stops and demonstrates that she is willing to do whatever it takes to win. A massive wind blade suddenly rushes toward her back, proving that hesitation is punished in battle. At the last second, a towering pillar of ice erupts from the ground and blocks the attack. Breathing heavily, Luna braces herself against the ice barrier and struggles to withstand the impact. Her opponent smirks and declares that the fight is over. Luna's eyes widen. Without warning, a fast-moving spell curves around the ice wall and strikes her directly. A cloud of dust and shattered debris fills the arena. From the stands, Derek watches the explosion without the slightest concern. Luna's mother jumps to her feet and screams her daughter's name. Her father also rises in alarm as she demands that the referee stop the match immediately. However, the family patriarch calmly tells his wife to sit down because the duel is not over yet. She insists that their daughter was hit, but he points out that the protective pendant never activated. The bearded noble studies the situation carefully, trying to understand what happened. His attention then shifts toward Derek. The young tutor remains seated, completely relaxed. The patriarch realizes that Derek is not worried at all and begins to wonder if he anticipated this outcome. Meanwhile, Luna's opponent walks through the dust, confused. He knows his spell connected, yet the defense failed to trigger. More importantly, he cannot find his opponent. As he steps across the wreckage, he notices something strange. A wooden plank near his foot begins to crack. A rumbling sound rises from beneath the arena. Suddenly, a massive ice pillar bursts upward and launches him into the air. Caught off guard, he crashes back down and slides across the arena while struggling to regain his balance. Furious, he realizes that Luna has been attacking from beneath the stage. He immediately looks toward the referee, remembering that leaving the arena normally results in an instant loss. The mustached official shakes his head. Luna has not violated any rules. The noble finally understands that the area beneath the arena is still considered part of the battlefield. He grits his teeth, calling it a dirty trick. At that moment, he hears another rumble. Looking down, he reacts just in time as another ice spike bursts through the floor. He jumps backward to avoid it. Moments later, dozens of additional ice spikes erupt throughout the arena, forcing him to keep moving. Annoyed, he complains that it is impossible to hit Luna when he cannot even see her. Leaping across the battlefield, he mutters that there is not a shred of noble etiquette in this fight. Staring into the dark hole below, he angrily calls his sister's name. Deep underground, the girl in the red hood glares back with a cold, intimidating stare. Her glowing eyes reveal her determination to win at any cost. Suddenly, the mage realizes he has seen that expression before. The calm, calculating look reminds him of someone else. Turning his head slightly, he finally understands. That influence came from Derek. Looking directly at the albino tutor, he becomes certain that this strategy was his idea. His expression hardens. Gripping his cloak, he adopts a much more serious attitude. Then he removes the heavy garment and throws it aside, making himself lighter and more mobile. Extending his hand, he announces that he is ready to play by the same rules. A powerful magical aura gathers around him as he stands amid the ruined arena. In the stands, Luna's mother is horrified to see her daughter crawling through dirt and debris. She once again demands that the duel be stopped. Her husband remains calm and reminds her that Luna has broken no rules. The patriarch, meanwhile, grows increasingly impressed by his daughter's intelligence and decides to keep watching. Hidden underground, Luna takes a deep breath while leaning against an ice pillar. Maintaining complete focus, she uses every sense available to predict her opponent's next move. By observing traces of magical particles drifting through cracks in the arena floor, she tracks the flow of his mana. Above her, the noble begins reciting a powerful spell while staring threateningly at the ground. Before he can finish, an ice spike erupts beneath his feet. His concentration breaks instantly. Shaking with frustration, he realizes that Luna attacks every time he attempts to cast a spell. Narrowing his eyes, he decides he must change tactics if he wants to force her out. From above, he stands in the center of the destroyed arena near the flagpole. Below, Luna notices that the flow of mana on the surface has suddenly stopped. Confused, she looks upward and wonders what he is planning. Outside the battlefield, even the referee begins sweating, sensing that something dangerous is about to happen. Then the young noble leaps high into the air and grabs the arena's flagpole. Perched above the battlefield, he trusts that Luna will not be able to locate him. However, remaining there prevents him from casting spells normally. Instead, he points a finger downward and gathers a massive amount of blue magical energy. Without reciting a spell, he unleashes a gigantic beam of blue light. The blast crashes into the arena with tremendous force. Derek continues watching calmly from the stands. The overwhelming energy slams directly into the stone foundation of the arena, sending cracks spreading in every direction. With the foundation destroyed, the massive metal structure breaks free and begins falling from above. Using the collapsing pillar as support, the young warrior launches himself toward the battlefield. The enormous structure crashes into the wooden arena, creating a huge explosion of dust and debris. Seeing the destruction, the woman panics and desperately screams her son's name. Amid the cloud of dust, the young noble lands safely on the shattered arena floor. Covering his mouth against the debris, energy, he carefully scans the battlefield in search of the young apprentice. Through the haze, he spots the silhouette of the girl trying to escape. Without hesitation, he extends his hand and forms a glowing blue magical arrow. With a sharp sound, the projectile tears through the dust and races toward its target. The blue arrow closes in on the frightened girl's eye. However, with incredible reflexes, she throws herself backward and narrowly avoids it. The mage immediately raises his hand again as powerful blue energy gathers around it. The apprentice widens her eyes, sensing the danger. A giant magical spear forms in the air, radiating enough power to completely destroy its target. Terrified, she watches the high-level spell take shape before her. The noble launches the attack, forcing her to sprint desperately through the dust. Confident, he believes the short distance gives him a decisive advantage. To his surprise, the young girl suddenly charges forward and tackles her own brother to the ground. Her fierce expression shows that she intends to fight until the very end. Thrown off balance, the young noble crashes to the ground in shock. Breathing heavily, he clutches his chest as pain spreads through his body from the unexpected impact. Without wasting a second, Luna grabs a handful of dirt from the ruined arena. She immediately throws it into his face. The warrior squeezes his eyes shut as the dust blinds him. While he struggles to clear his vision, Luna leaps away and creates distance. Angered, he wonders if she is resorting to such underhanded tactics because she is running low on mana. Even so, he realizes that she is fighting with everything she has despite the odds against her. His expression hardens. He decides to stop holding back and use his full strength. The scene shifts briefly to the bright sun shining above the arena. Back on the battlefield, Luna watches her opponent carefully. Bruised, exhausted, and bleeding, she pushes herself back to her feet and calmly fixes her hair. A thin trail of blood runs down her chin, revealing the price of fighting such a powerful mage. A drop of red paint falling into a bucket appears in her memory. Derek once explained that magical energy is like paint, while a spell is the brush. The brush creates a perfect stroke, showing how magic must be shaped with precision. In the past, the albino mage taught her how to focus her mana while painting a starry sky. With a calm voice, he described that process as true magic. The young girl listened in fascination, finally understanding how to control her power. Together, they watched a trail of blue light glowing beautifully beneath the night sky. Back in the present, Luna closes her eyes and focuses on those lessons. A brilliant blue aura begins surrounding her entire body. She feels magical energy flowing through her fingertips as she prepares her counterattack. The intense glow in her hand proves that she has finally learned to channel her power properly. With determination in her eyes, she decides to paint her masterpiece using that strength. A large magic circle appears beneath her feet. Moments later, numerous floating ice spears emerge around her. In the audience, the referee breaks into a cold sweat after recognizing the power of the spell. Her mother is stunned to realize that her youngest daughter is about to cast first-level magic. Even her opponent is shocked, recognizing that she has far exceeded his expectations. Grasping one of the frozen spears, Luna fixes her gaze on him. At the same time, the noble extends his arm and creates a violent blue wind spell. Confidently, he declares that he will always stay one step ahead of her. He unleashes a barrage of magical arrows, certain that his attack is faster and will secure victory. Luna refuses to retreat. Instead, she launches every ice spear she has with maximum force. The mage's eyes widen as the spears pierce through and completely neutralize his spell. One of the frozen projectiles collides violently, producing a blinding flash. A massive explosion erupts across the arena, sending smoke and magical energy everywhere. Witnessing the terrifying blast, Luna's mother screams in panic, fearing for her daughter's life. As the dust settles, a large blue magical barrier suddenly appears. The protective shield shines brightly, proving that it absorbed the devastating impact and prevented a fatal outcome. The dark-haired noble struggles to catch his breath after enduring the collision. Across from him, Luna is also breathing heavily, her face covered with injuries. From the stands, Derek watches the scene with a serious and focused expression. A memory from 1 year earlier appears. A small bird's nest sits in a tree with 3 chicks inside. Their mother feeds them while perched near a large window. At the same time, the family patriarch walks through the mansion's corridors accompanied by his trusted butler. The bespectacled servant informs him about a letter received from another influential noble family. As they pass a doorway, the patriarch glances inside. He sees his youngest daughter sitting alone. The girl stares silently toward the light coming through the large window, her expression empty and sad. The sight leaves the bearded noble deeply concerned. Back in the present, Luna bears several injuries across her head from the violent clash. As the dust continues to fade, the blue magical barrier surrounding her slowly begins to disappear. At that moment, the young mage realizes that the protective charm on her necklace has finally activated. Lying on the ground, the noble warrior struggles to stand while staring at his opponent from across the arena. In the stands, the albino teacher closes his eyes, already understanding the outcome of the battle. Privately, he admits that his student has lost the match. Overwhelmed by frustration, the young girl breaks down in tears and cries openly in the middle of the arena. From the balcony above, her father watches his 2 children facing each other on the ruined battlefield. Meanwhile, her mother turns to her husband in anger, demanding to know what kind of duel they had allowed. Below, the young apprentice wipes away her tears, unable to accept the result. The family patriarch listens to his wife's complaints without changing his serious expression. A memory surfaces of the eldest son wearing the family's knightly armor. The patriarch praises him, saying his eyes resemble his father's, filled with ambition and pride. Back in the present, the young girl lowers her head, trying to hide her tears. The older noble notices a significant change in his youngest daughter's attitude. He realizes that her gaze has become stronger and more determined. Several maids approach the injured girl, worried about her condition. One servant reaches out to help, but the young maid sharply pushes her hand away. Refusing assistance, she turns and faces her brother once more. The dark-haired warrior is surprised by her determination. Scratching the back of his head, he finally gives in and praises her performance. The compliment goes unanswered. With her head lowered, she walks away sadly alongside the maids. Suddenly, she stops after spotting someone familiar. Standing before her is her albino teacher, still seated on a wooden bench. He silently watches her with his deep red eyes. Ashamed, Luna cannot meet his gaze and turns her face away. Tears stream down her cheeks as she struggles with her failure. Gripping her dress tightly, she finally admits that she lost. With tears covering her face, she apologizes to her master. The white-haired young man remains silent, listening to her sobs. Then he calmly rises from the bench and places his hands on her shoulders. Gently, he tells her that losing is not a problem. He advises her to overcome her frustration and use it to become stronger. Hearing those words, she looks up through her tears, feeling comforted. Unable to hold back any longer, she cries even harder in front of him. The maids watch in shock as the young noblewoman breaks down in the courtyard. At that moment, hurried footsteps approach. The family matriarch rushes through the garden in her elegant green dress, calling her daughter's name. She kneels and embraces the injured girl, saying she must have suffered during the battle. Holding her tightly, the mother reassures her that everything is fine and that she only needs proper treatment. Still saddened by her defeat, the young apprentice quietly agrees. As the servants escort the girl away for medical care, the mother wipes her tears and turns toward the teacher. The dark-cloaked mage waits calmly for what she has to say. With firm steps, the matriarch marches across the lawn to confront him. The white-haired young man watches her approach with a calm expression. Furious, she calls him trash and demands to know what he was thinking. She accuses him of teaching dangerous magic irresponsibly. Continuing her criticism, she claims he stained her daughter's honor with underhanded tactics. The albino looks away as she condemns his methods. The noblewoman raises her voice even further, insisting that there are things a commoner like him could never understand. She argues that dignity and status must always be protected. At that moment, the family patriarch arrives. The matriarch is startled when her husband openly reprimands her. Holding her arm, he asks whether she realizes who is behaving improperly. Confused, she argues that the teacher is merely a commoner. The patriarch agrees about his origins, but reminds her that he is still their daughter's master. The white-haired tutor listens silently, noticing how different this nobleman is from the others. Turning toward him, the patriarch apologizes, explaining that every parent loves their children in their own way. The mercenary remains silent, meeting the nobleman's gaze. The family head then asks him to accompany him to a private room for a conversation. The matriarch watches them leave through the garden, still stunned. Clenching her jaw, she struggles to understand her husband's actions. Inside a luxurious office, the patriarch dips his pen into ink and begins writing a document. Seated at his desk, he states that the teacher deserves a proper reward. As compensation, he offers an extraordinary treasure for a commoner, a third-level magic spell. The young mercenary is visibly surprised by the generous offer. Inwardly, he admires the nobleman's wisdom and recognizes the value of such a reward. Knowing he cannot refuse, he immediately accepts. The patriarch acknowledges that the tutor did a good job. However, he explains that noble society demands a much higher standard. The albino tries to convince him that the girl has finally found her path and will improve quickly. The patriarch interrupts him. He explains that his daughter needs more than an instructor, she needs a true master. With that, he signs the document, revealing that the decision to dismiss the mercenary has already been made. Folding his hands together, the bearded noble states that he is granting the commoner a reward that someone of his status should never have been able to obtain. He explains that such actions offend many nobles, and that he has only been overlooking the issue because of who the young man is. The boy listens silently, realizing that the duke knows he is seeking even more powerful spells. While reviewing the documents, the head of the household states that this is why the tutor cannot leave. The older noble looks at the boy and asks if he was already prepared to depart. Relaxing in his chair, the young man confirms it, while the noble says he understands such ambition. The patriarch then asks him to continue training the girl a little longer before receiving his reward. He asks once more whether the mercenary wants to obtain third-tier magic immediately, his red eyes shining with intensity. Without hesitation, the young man accepts the valuable offer. Soon after their agreement, the massive doors of the luxurious library open, revealing countless mysteries. Fascinated, the cloaked young man walks through corridors lined with rare books and towering shelves. Curious, he pulls a heavy ancient grimoire from a shelf and begins inspecting it. Opening the book, he studies the large magic circles engraved on its aged pages. Completely absorbed in the text, he immerses himself in the mysterious power contained within. The quality of the magic amazes him, and he is impressed by the strength of the family's spells. The tutor reflects that many people would kill for weak spells, spells, while every spell here is 3rd tier or higher. Wasting no time, he continues flipping through the grimoire, determined to grow stronger through these books. The white-haired tutor concludes that such valuable knowledge is reason enough to stay. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the girl's father drinks from a wooden mug and warns that her mother will soon cause trouble. The scene shifts to 2 white doves flying freely across a clear sky. On a beautiful day, the young red-haired apprentice stands proudly with her hands on her hips. Excited, she tells her albino master that she has finally earned the title of mage. Reading at a table, he responds seriously that she barely managed to use the spell on Lala. Surprised by his reaction, she scratches her head and realizes that pleasing her mentor is not easy. Looking at her from the corner of his eye, he reminds her how much she cried during the duel. Embarrassed, she claims that dust had simply gotten into her eyes. Pouting, Luna complains that her father should have informed her sooner that the tutor was not being dismissed. Calmly closing his grimoire, the albino tells her it is time to focus on more difficult spells. Excited, she approaches him eagerly, hoping to learn powerful new attacks. He reminds her that learning magic at such a speed is already unusual. Since her awakening, Luna has constantly suggested dangerous spells such as her brother's Windblade or magical arrows. She admits she likes the Ice Spear, but her tutor insists on returning to the basics. Confused, she asks why they are not focusing on offensive magic. The albino explains that a strong foundation is essential for every mage. He demonstrates how to control mana in its purest form. Disappointed that she is not learning explosive spells immediately, Luna studies her master and notices him staring at her face. Embarrassed, she crosses her arms and asks if something is wrong with her injured face. Resting his hand on his chin, he simply says that her obedience is fascinating. Furious, she insists that she has always paid attention. A memory flashes back to the time she dumped a huge bucket of water on him. Laughing, he reminds her that she did it twice. Embarrassed again, she tries to hide her guilt while he smiles at the memory. Trying to change the subject, Luna loudly comments on how nice the weather is for training. The red-eyed mercenary responds with a subtle smile. Later that night, the full moon illuminates the mansion. On the grassy field, the young girl collapses from exhaustion after intense training. Watching her with tired affection, the tutor reminds her that she will be even busier soon. Kneeling beside her, he explains that she will have many demanding lessons ahead. Holding her head, Luna worries about the long list of noble subjects she must study. The tutor thinks it sounds wonderful, but she complains about subjects such as sewing and geography. Looking at her seriously, he explains that this is how her older sister became the family's jewel. Sitting together on the grass beneath the stars, Luna asks how long he plans to stay. He calmly assures her that he has the support of the family leader and that nobody would easily dismiss him. With a cynical smile, she reminds him that her mother will never forgive the trouble they caused. Confused, he listens as Luna explains that continuing to teach such barbaric methods could lead to punishment. Realizing her point, he admits that his training style is practical and lacks refinement. With a dark expression, he comments that dealing with the angry matriarch would not be very difficult. Alarmed, Luna cannot understand what her dangerous mentor means. The next morning, the sun rises behind the family's grand castle towers. Dressed in green, the matriarch walks through the estate surrounded by maids. She recalls the tutor's sinister smile and fears that he is teaching her beloved daughter his worst instincts. In her imagination, she sees her daughter bursting through doors while proudly displaying a wild boar. Despairing, the mother laments the future of her once elegant princess. As the servants close the doors, the matriarch wonders what else that commoner might teach her daughter. Frustrated, she decides she must find a solution immediately. Suddenly, she turns in surprise when she hears her daughter's sweet voice calling her. Smiling warmly, she greets the girl with affection. As she watches her daughter smiling in her arms, her expression gradually changes. Something feels different. Wearing a beautiful blue dress, the girl politely asks whether her mother slept well. Shocked by such refined manners, the matriarch can barely react. Calmly, Luna explains that she would love to chat, but she has a piano lesson to attend. Still processing everything, the woman stammers and simply agrees. Luna then performs an elegant curtsy and says she must leave. Completely confused, the matriarch asks whether etiquette lessons have already begun. Smiling confidently, Luna confirms it and thanks her mother for all her care. Speechless, the matriarch simply nods and tells her daughter to go to her studies. From above, the young girl walks across the courtyard, leaving her mother and the maids staring in disbelief. The shock is so great that one maid accidentally drops everything she is carrying. The young mage kindly turns around and, with a warm smile, asks whether she was hurt. Nervous, the maid stammers as she responds to the young noblewoman. The girl in the blue dress then walks away while the matriarch silently watches from a distance. Elsewhere, in a noble gathering hall decorated with an angel statue, several guests chat over tea. One woman remarks that the young lady had seemed very worried recently. Startled, the dark-haired noble covers her mouth and explains that she did not want to concern anyone before resolving the issue herself. Relieved, she tells her friends that everything has now been settled. The red-haired girl smiles and comments on rumors that her friend had been searching for someone outside noble society. Laughing, the noblewoman explains that she had actually been looking for a magic tutor for her younger sister. Curious, the redhead wonders what level of teacher she had been seeking. At that moment, a silver-haired girl joins the conversation and asks about the younger younger sister. The redhead recalls seeing the girl recently and noticing how polite she had become. The brunette enthusiastically praises her younger sister's refined behavior and mentions that she can already use first-tier magic. Taking notes, the silver-haired girl finds it strange and concludes that the new tutor must be exceptional. Laughing, the noblewoman reveals that she hired a mercenary because his skill outweighed his lack of noble status. The studious girl immediately stops writing when she hears the word mercenary. The redhead is equally shocked by the revelation. While sipping tea, she connects the dots and wonders how the rebellious Luna reacted to such a tutor. She recalls how troublesome the girl once was, even driving away the family's former head cook. It seems unbelievable that the household's biggest troublemaker became a capable mage so quickly. Smiling knowingly, the redhead concludes that the mysterious teacher must possess a rare talent. Curious, she directly asks for his name, eager to learn more before he becomes famous. Proudly, the brunette closes her eyes and calmly reveals that the tutor's name is Derek. Elsewhere, a young blonde student praises the same man while speaking with an elderly noblewoman. Hiding her irritation behind a forced smile, the woman compliments the girl's dedication to her studies. The child insists that all the credit belongs to her teacher. When asked about her progress, she admits that she once found everything difficult and only succeeded because of him. A vein appears on the noblewoman's forehead as she silently fumes while pretending to agree. After leaving the room, the matriarch walks down the corridor gripping her dress tightly, her face filled with anger. With a cold expression, she swears not to let that commoner continue influencing her daughter. Outside, a young maid carries a bucket while happily discussing the young lady's newfound kindness. An elderly gardener agrees enthusiastically, commenting on how dramatically she has changed in recent weeks. Even the monocled butler compares her favorably to her older sister. Hearing the servants praise the girl only makes the matriarch's anger grow stronger. Later that night, the stars shine above the estate. On the dark grass, a large magical grimoire lies open, glowing with mystical energy. The white-haired tutor breathes heavily, sweat covering his face after intense training. Surrounded by a blue aura, he focuses all of his power, slowly controlling his breathing and mana. He channels energy through his body. Powerful blue flames emerge from his gloved hand, illuminating the area. The effort becomes overwhelming, and he collapses onto the grass, exhausted and struggling to catch his breath. Still recovering, he glances over his shoulder and immediately apologizes for startling someone. He notices a uniformed young man approaching. Smiling casually, the newcomer asks whether he interrupted anything. The tutor assures him there is no problem and asks why he is visiting so late. Silence settles between them as the wind rustles the leaves beneath the starry sky. Sitting together on a fallen log, the soldier explains that he wants to discuss the young mage. Before speaking further, however, he notices the magical grimoire and is astonished by its power. He is shocked to learn that the Duke allowed someone to borrow such a rare item. Calmly, the tutor explains that although the magic is advanced, there is no harm in studying it early. The guard recalls the bearded Duke once describing the white-haired man as a genius. Returning to the conversation, he awkwardly compliments the tutor's talent. The tutor immediately asks what the real issue is. Sighing, the soldier admits that he needs help understanding what teenage girls like these days. The albino mage simply stares at him in silence. Blushing, the guard wonders if a handmade cloth doll would make a good gift. The tutor instantly rejects the idea. Embarrassed, the guard admits that he expected that reaction and thought the idea was weak himself. Sighing again, the soldier stands and looks toward the mansion, asking whether the tutor has finished his nightly training. Carrying the grimoire, the mage joins him as they slowly walk across the courtyard. Breaking the silence, the guard sincerely thanks him for everything he has done for the family. He explains that the atmosphere in the household has improved significantly and that even his strict father seems happier. The albino remarks that the Duke remains a mystery, causing the guard to laugh and agree that everyone feels the same way. Suddenly, the guard stops walking in the grass, drawing the tutor's attention from just behind him. Looking up at the starry sky, the young man admits that people can change, especially children of that age. Calmly, he confesses that he also intends to change his own behavior now that the younger sister has changed. Turning toward his friend, the guard thanks the tutor once again for all his hard work. The red-eyed mage listens quietly before changing the subject. He explains that Luna's magic resembles the process of painting a beautiful picture. Internally surprised by such a subtle observation, the tutor reveals that his student is using a method focused on a more instinctive and untamed form of magic. He seriously explains that at this pace, she will soon reach a level where she can train entirely on her own. Walking ahead, he adds that interfering further with her development would only hold her back. The guard smiles as he watches the tutor's back, feeling that the day his sister shines is drawing near. 2 months pass in the blink of an eye. A colorful flower rests on a table inside Luna's room. While a maid styles her blonde hair, the girl asks about the flower. Holding it carefully, she inhales its sweet fragrance and comments that spring seems endless. The maid praises Luna's remarkable magical progress and notes how much closer she has become to the household staff. Smiling gently, Luna says she regrets the time she wasted and credits her new life to her master. The maid laughs and says she understands Luna's excitement since it is the day of another magic lesson. Delighted, Luna asks her to prepare another flower flower so she can give it to her teacher as a gift. However, fate has other plans. The flower slips from her hands and falls to the floor. Its delicate petals scatter through the air, instantly shattering the cheerful mood. Frozen in shock, Luna watches as tears begin streaming down her face. Confused and heartbroken, she whispers her beloved tutor's name with a trembling voice. Elsewhere, her older brother stands against a wall, confirming that she has finally learned the truth. With an empty expression, the albino tutor states that there is nothing left for him to teach her. He explains that just as the seasons change, neither winter nor spring lasts forever. Earlier, during a meeting with the bearded duke, the tutor had explained the girl's extraordinary talent. He admitted that continuing to guide her would only clip her wings. Standing with his back turned, the duke accepts those words and agrees that the tutor's role has come to an end. A heavy silence fills the room as the father reflects on his daughter's growth. Eventually, he rises from his desk and looks at the young mercenary with genuine respect. Walking toward the window, he thanks him sincerely for everything he has done for his daughter. He admits that political matters consumed so much of his attention that he failed in many ways as a father. Passing by the tutor, the duke asks when he plans to leave. The mage calmly explains that he will travel with the dark-haired noblewoman who is scheduled to visit the estate soon. Sitting on the sofa, he agrees to return the library key and the grimoire he had been studying. However, the duke interrupts him, saying that he may keep the grimoire and only needs to return access to the library. The young man's red eyes widen in surprise at such a valuable reward. With his hands behind his back, the duke gazes at the sunlight through the window and dismisses him from the room. Silent, the albino lowers his gaze, processing his unexpectedly profitable unemployment. Moved by the noble's generosity, he places a hand over his chest and bows in gratitude. Later, he walks through the palace's vast corridors in silence. Meanwhile, Luna confronts him, upset that he appeared in her life so suddenly and now intends to leave just as quickly. The tutor calls her name in a serious, formal tone. Standing in her room, he asks what more he could possibly teach her, knowing she would stubbornly refuse to accept the answer. Desperate and nearly in tears, Luna begs him not to leave. The albino lowers his head and remains silent before her painful plea. Then he turns away and slowly walks across the blue carpet. After bowing, he explains that he will return to life as a mercenary and hopes to meet her again among high society in the future. Hearing this, Luna clenches her hands, trembling with sadness. The tutor smiles and promises that they will meet again once he becomes much stronger. Pouting slightly, she struggles to hold back her tears and mutters that he is incredibly annoying. Night falls over the mansion as Luna admits to herself that he always seems to have the right answer. Later, she sleeps restlessly, drenched in sweat and trapped within a disturbing nightmare. In her dream, twisted shadows surround her, laughing as they tell her she is nothing more than a talentless child. Terrified, she cries while cruel voices call her the shame of the family. Her blue eyes widen in panic as the voices insist that she should never have been born. With a frightened scream, Luna jolts awake in the darkness of her room. Breathing rapidly, she tries to calm herself. Running a hand through her damp hair, she realizes with relief that it was only a nightmare. Moments later, a worried maid enters after hearing the noise. As the woman asks if she is alright, Luna hesitates. A thought crosses her mind. She wonders whether she should return to being rude and troublesome as an excuse to keep her tutor nearby. Looking down at her hands beneath the blanket, she struggles with her emotions. She asks herself whether her beloved master would truly stay for her sake. The maid asks again if something is wrong. To everyone's surprise, a calm and mature smile appears on Luna's face. The maid is shocked when the girl declares that she will never behave that way again. With a bright smile, Luna reassures her that bad behavior gives her no value. The next morning, sunlight illuminates the family's enormous estate, marking the beginning of a new day. Outside in the courtyard, the albino mage loads his luggage into a carriage, preparing to travel with a dark-haired noblewoman. Smiling from inside the carriage, she tells him to say his goodbyes because they will be departing soon. Wrapped in a long, dark cloak, the silver-haired man simply nods. Outside, the entire family and many loyal servants gather in front of the castle. Facing her former tutor, Luna asks one last time if he is truly leaving. The mage quietly confirms that he is. The older brother praises the tutor's hard work and offers his assistance whenever it may be needed in the future. Humbly, the young mercenary lowers his head and thanks the family for their hospitality. Soon after, he raises his gaze and looks directly at his former student with his striking red eyes. Standing in the courtyard with her arms crossed, the blonde girl tries to maintain a tough expression. Embarrassed by his silence, she blushes and demands to know why he keeps staring at her. Stubbornly, she insists that she will not cry to make him stay, because she is no longer a little child. The albino smiles warmly and tells her it was an honor to teach her. He asks her to always remember the magic he passed on to her. Proudly, the young noblewoman declares that she will tell everyone his name and make sure he never has a moment of peace again. Hearing such confidence from his student leaves the tutor speechless. Tears begin to gather in the girl's eyes, revealing how much she will miss him. Hiding her sadness, she shouts for him to take care of himself. The tutor smiles and asks her to do the same. Placing a hand on her chest, the young mage proudly insists that she has grown up and can take care of herself now. Seeing her growth fills the mercenary with affection. At that moment, an old memory resurfaces. He remembers saying those same words long ago. In his memory, a kind woman embraces him when he was still a child child. Smiling protectively, she asks him to always remember her words. Returning to the present, the tutor remains silent as he processes the memory. Then, in a serious tone, he calls out to his former student. Looking at her sincerely, he gently touches her cheek and tells her that she does not need to force herself to grow up so quickly. Tears once again fill Luna's blue eyes. Turning away from the carriage, she carefully wipes her tears. As the tutor begins to leave, she calls out to him one last time. He stops briefly. With tears in her eyes, the young mage waves goodbye and promises that they will meet again. She continues waving as she watches him enter the carriage. Trying not to cry, she vows that when they meet again, she will be much stronger. Inside the carriage, the young man listens in silence as the scene shifts to the blue sky above. Later, the carriage arrives at the commercial district. Rats scatter between wooden crates, and a worn tavern stands nearby with two unusual axes embedded above its entrance. Inside, a young man is punched hard in the face while onlookers cheer. Hidden beneath the hood, the albino watches quietly as two large men encourage the beating. The injured fighter's face is already bloody, and his opponent prepares another strike. Suddenly, a blonde woman with a ponytail rushes in excitedly and calls out his name. Smiling slightly, the white-haired man raises a hand and confirms that he has returned. Soon, the three adventurers are gathered inside the famous tavern, while the albino drinks calmly. The bearded tavern owner offers him his favorite drink free of charge to celebrate his return. Resting her face on one hand, the blonde warrior jokes that he looks pale enough to be a spoiled noble. A large warrior asks what happened at the mansion. The blonde explains that he spent the last months working as a magic tutor. Taking a drink, the white-haired man simply says there is nothing interesting to tell and that he was only doing his job. The blonde complains that he is too mysterious and refuses to share details of his journey. The larger warrior points out that she had to work much harder while covering for his absence. With a grin, the tavern owner comments that such work must have earned him a fortune. Without turning around, the albino replies that he received something far more valuable than money. Curious, everyone asks what he means. In response, he places a large magical grimoire on the table. The two mercenaries stare in shock and assume it is a second-tier spellbook. Calmly correcting them, he explains that it is actually a third-tier grimoire. Both of them immediately react with envy. The larger warrior jokingly accuses him of stealing it, while the blonde only wants to know where she can find one herself. The tutor casually explains that the duke personally gave it to him as a reward. The blonde immediately grabs him by the neck, shouting that it must be a lie and demanding to know whether the duke is looking for archers. Later that night, a single candle lights the nearly empty tavern, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Sitting at a table, the albino asks about available jobs. Lying across the counter, the blonde finds his urgency strange. The red-eyed mage explains that his combat skills have stagnated and that he needs more training. Leaning on a broom, the tavern owner assures him that powerful mages never struggle to find work. The mercenary replies that he would prefer to start immediately, ideally the next day. The following morning, the sun shines brightly as the two adventurers travel along a dirt road in a wagon. Without warning, a grotesque green monster attacks. The archer flees through the forest in panic, but with her partner's help, the creature is quickly defeated. Later, inside a dark cave, giant monstrous spiders appear, ready to devour the pair. Back on the road, the mage calmly reads a book while his companion suffers from motion sickness caused by the wagon's constant movement. At night, they sleep in bedrolls around a campfire to keep warm. Away from camp, the white-haired mage trains alone in an open area, surrounded by a massive blue aura. Closing his eyes, he focuses all of his magical power into his hands. A glowing blue mana stone floats between them, radiating intense energy. Moments later, the force erupts. The blast throws him backward as a brilliant flash engulfs the area. The magical explosion lights up the entire forest with a bright blue glow visible from far away. Lying on the grass afterward, the exhausted warrior breathes heavily and stares at his dirt-covered hand while recovering from the effort. Looking at the open grimoire, the young mage realizes he has already mastered nearly every second-tier spell. However, he also knows that reaching the third tier alone in the wilderness is an enormous challenge. The seasons pass. Autumn leaves fall around the old tavern, marking the passage of time. Soon, winter arrives and blankets everything in snow. One day, the tavern's heavy wooden door creaks open as icy wind rushes inside. The albino mage and the blonde archer enter, both exhausted and injured. The woman immediately complains about the freezing weather. The tavern owner is impressed by their determination. The archer grumbles that her partner never listens, saying only fools would hunt a harpy during weather that harsh. The young man thanks the owner for a warm towel and admits he already feels better after the difficult mission. The tavern keeper tells them they can rest, but mentions a new job that would be perfect for the mercenary. Smiling, he explains that it pays well and is relatively easy, although somewhat tedious. The request comes from the Royal Mercenary Corps, located on the city's famous West Street. He then asks whether the young man knows the respected Bell Media family of the region. The platinum-haired mage learns that they are looking for a poor mage to participate in magical duels as a training partner. His role is essentially to endure a few hits and help a noble improve. Soon afterward, he arrives at the dueling arena. Nearby, an older instructor and a red-haired noblewoman discuss the training session. The young woman asks who her opponent will be, and her teacher explains that a commoner mage has been hired for practice. practice. Annoyed, she complains about fighting a commoner and considers the idea ridiculous. The older man simply smiles and says it is part of her training, adding that the mercenary will be compensated generously. The redhead mutters that nobles always use poorer people as training tools. She admits that her opponent can use first-tier magic, but she is already approaching the second tier herself. Sitting on a bench, the albino adjusts his gloves while preparing for the duel. After clearing his throat, he stands and faces his opponent with a focused gaze. With her arms crossed, the noblewoman looks him up and down and asks if he is today's sparring partner. Politely, he introduces himself as Derek. The redhead introduces herself as Helenta. She pauses, feeling as though she has heard his name before. Her teacher is surprised by how young the mage appears, and Helenta soon leads everyone to the arena. In the courtyard, she stretches and warms up before the duel. Afterwards, she asks whether the mercenary understands the standard rules of magical combat. The platinum-haired mage calmly confirms that he does. Satisfied, she tells him to fight seriously because she intends to finish the duel quickly. Her plan is simple: knock him out of bounds with a shockwave and end the match immediately. However, Derek asks an unexpected question. If he is to fight seriously, what level of resistance will she require? Confused, Helenta finds the question strange. The mage explains that he needs to know so he can assist her training properly. The older instructor watches silently, intrigued by the exchange. The redhead laughs mockingly, amused by the commoner's confidence. Smirking, she repeats that he should use his full strength. The albino remains silent for a moment before agreeing. Blue magical energy immediately gathers around his hands. The two mages face each other across the arena, both ready to begin. Helenta launches the first spell, convinced he is arrogant. Although she recognizes his talent at a young age, she intends to demonstrate the enormous difference between nobles and commoners. A powerful magical attack races toward him. The red-eyed mage watches it approach without showing the slightest fear. He remains completely still and waits until the spell is almost upon him. Suddenly, the attack collides with an invisible barrier and explodes in a brilliant flash before ever reaching its target. Helenta is stunned. Her powerful spell accomplished nothing. Calmly, Derek asks what attack she plans to use next. Angered and surprised, the redhead realizes that his confidence was not unfounded. Still, she prepares a stronger spell, a barrage of magical arrows. A rain of blue mana arrows streaks across the battlefield, glowing with icy energy. Declaring that the duel is over, she pours all her power into the attack. In response, the mercenary makes a simple movement and redirects one of the arrows. To Helente's shock, all the arrows suddenly change direction and fly away from their original target. Frozen in disbelief, she watches her own attacks pass dangerously close to her. She cannot understand how someone could manipulate such a basic spell with such precision and mastery. The older instructor quietly admits that the rumors about Derek were completely true. Surrounded by a fiery aura, Helente finally acknowledges that she underestimated her opponent. This time, she decides to fight with everything she has. An immense amount of fire mana erupts from her body. Derek immediately notices the change in strategy and realizes she intends to destroy the entire battlefield. He compliments her ability to adapt. Moments later, she unleashes a devastating fire spell. Golden spears of flame begin raining from the sky, covering the entire arena. The young mage looks up at the incoming storm and realizes there is no way to dodge an attack of that scale. Instead, he creates a blue dome of energy around himself. The flaming spears crash against the barrier one after another. The impact forces him to kneel beneath the relentless assault. Helenta watches as smoke and dust engulf the arena. Gradually, the cloud begins to clear. As visibility returns, Derek emerges completely unharmed. With a small gesture, he invites her to come closer. Suddenly, his eyes widen. Helente bursts through the smoke and forms an ice spear directly in front of his face in the blink of an eye. The mercenary instantly realizes there is no time to dodge or create another shield. For the first time in the duel, he is genuinely impressed. Recognizing her raw talent, he admits to himself that the young mage is truly exceptional. At that moment, an intense burst of white light erupts between them, illuminating the entire arena. The young mage cries out in pain, unable to see anything after the blinding flash. The force of the spell throws her backward, leaving her disoriented on the ground. With her vision blurred, she tries to locate her opponent but can see nothing. Instead, she focuses on her hearing, hoping to track his position through sound. Suddenly, an ice blade flies past her face, narrowly missing her. Startled, she realizes she never heard it coming. She quickly understands that Derek used a disruption spell to eliminate all sound from the battlefield. Another ice blade shoots toward her in complete silence. It grazes her cheek, leaving a small cut and increasing her anxiety. Then, she remembers his first attack and begins wondering why he deliberately missed earlier. Anger quickly replaces confusion. She realizes the mercenary had been holding back the entire time and had never fought at full strength. Meanwhile, Derek continues controlling several ice blades, making them circle around him in the air. The red-haired mage shouts that he has no chance and raises a mana barrier to defend herself. However, her eyes widen when she notices an unexpected movement. Instead of staying at a distance, Derek rushes directly toward her. Calling him an idiot, she assumes he is making a mistake because her specialty is rapid spell manifestation. The mercenary closes the gap with one hand extended, ready to strike. Confident she can cast first and end the fight immediately, she prepares her next spell. Instead of attacking with his hands, Derek suddenly stomps the ground. A powerful shockwave races across the arena floor, throwing the young mage backward and destroying her balance. Completely confused, she struggles to understand what just happened. At that moment, purple energy emerges from the ground around Derek's feet. The noblewoman realizes in shock that he is channeling magic through his legs and directing lightning toward her. The electrical strikes hit their mark. She screams as powerful currents surge through her body. The older instructor watches in disbelief as Derek advances while his student endures repeated shocks. Despite his extensive combat experience, even he cannot fully read Derek's movements. Lying on the ground, the young mage stares at her opponent while breathing heavily. Surprised by his strength, she finally smiles. Admitting that he is unlike anyone she has fought before, she brushes her sweat-soaked hair aside. Approaching her, Derek admits that he underestimated her at first. He thought she was merely arrogant and lacked real ability. Listening carefully, the redhead rises to her feet and faces him directly. Then she bows, respectfully. She thanks him for teaching her something valuable during their duel. With renewed confidence shining in her eyes, she thanks him again. Without warning, she leaps forward and launches a barrage of purple light. Caught off guard, Derek dodges most of the attack and blocks the rest with his hands. He quickly raises a magical barrier as she continues attacking relentlessly. However, one of her own spells rebounds toward her. The resulting explosion throws her backward. Before she can hit the ground, Derek catches her in midair and prevents a serious injury. Their eyes meet. The young mage freezes. His glowing red eyes and serious expression leave her unable to react. Her heart races as she stares back in stunned silence. At that moment, a bell rings loudly across the arena, signaling the end of the duel. The older instructor lowers the bell and calmly announces the conclusion of the training session. The young noblewoman steps away from Derek and regains her composed posture. She compliments his performance, while the mercenary bows respectfully. Pouting in frustration, she stands silently as the wind moves through her hair. A short time later, Derek finds her seated indoors while a maid tends to her red hair. He tells her that she is an excellent mage. She immediately replies that his reflexes are far more impressive. Smiling, she jokes that he must be very skilled at flattering people in order to survive as a mercenary. The white-haired mage explains that life as a mercenary forced him to learn many practical tricks. The young noblewoman admits that she respects hardworking people. However, she warns him that her former teacher would not appreciate his attitude. She advises him not to anger the old man if he wants to avoid trouble in the future. The redhead then says she learned a great deal from him and reveals that her next duel will take place in the Rose Hall. Derek responds that with her natural talent and raw power, she has little reason to worry. Taking a sip of tea, she casually says that she is not interested in anyone else because there is only one person she wants to defeat. The image of a blue-haired young woman appears in her mind. She reveals that her greatest rival is Zéline Eleanor de Plan, a famous mage. Hearing that name, Derek falls silent for a moment, as if he knows exactly who she is talking about. After saying everything she wanted to say, the noblewoman dismisses him and tells him he may leave. The young mercenary walks away, leaving her alone with her maid in the enormous hall. Holding her teacup, the red-haired mage begins thinking about Derek and the Beldam mercenaries. The name sounds strangely familiar. As she drinks her tea, she tries to remember where she heard it before. Suddenly, a memory surfaces. She recalls a blue-haired girl mentioning Derek in the past. Her eyes widen in shock. She finally remembers where she heard his name. Meanwhile, the cloaked mercenary walks across the courtyard, preparing to leave the estate. Without warning, the red-haired noblewoman rushes after him and grabs his arm, stopping him in his tracks. The albino turns around, confused by her sudden behavior. He waits silently for an explanation. With a victorious smile, she reveals the truth. Derek is the mercenary who trained her longtime rival. As the sun sets, warm light washes over the grand estate, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Inside a comfortable room, a large fireplace burns brightly, filling the space with warmth. Seated beside the fireplace, the noblewoman gets straight to the point. She says she would do anything to defeat Iselin. The young mercenary is surprised to hear the name of his former student mentioned once again. The red-haired mage explains that she needs to reach the second tier of magic, although simply winning her next duel would already be a major achievement. She remarks that Derek has a talent for softening things, since he only described her rival as competitive. In reality, she admits that she once hated her rival so much that she was willing to do almost anything to surpass her. The platinum-haired mercenary listens quietly as she confesses that she never hesitated to play dirty. Staring at the reflection in her teacup, she admits that jealousy is ugly. She envied her rival deeply, yet it never accomplished anything. Despite receiving insults, her rival always treated her kindly. Derek finally asks why she is telling him all of this. The noblewoman calmly places her teacup on the table and says she is completely serious. She still has more questions to ask. Relaxed, the red-eyed mercenary tells her to continue. Sitting close to the fire, she says he already knows how talented her rival is. What she really wants to know is the true gap between them. The albino listens silently as she explains her reasoning. The image of the blue-haired mage appears once again in her mind. Finally, she asks the question directly. What does she need to do to win? Derek remains silent for a moment, carefully considering his answer. Taking a sip of his drink, he agrees that her rival is exceptionally talented and praises her abilities. He explains that she improves quickly quickly and is often able to read people with remarkable accuracy. Looking into the young noblewoman's eyes, he realizes she is not asking for compliments. Watching the flames, he notices her desperation. She has become so determined that she is seeking help even from a mercenary. The atmosphere in the luxurious hall grows tense. After a long pause, Derek answers with complete honesty. "You won't win." The red-haired mage freezes. The mercenary remains calm as his red eyes reflect the firelight. Although shaken, she refuses to back down. Raising her head confidently, she swears she will win, no matter how impossible it seems. Seeing her determination, Derek remains silent and lets her continue. Then she leans forward and points out that he was the one who trained her rival. Desperate, she asks him to become her teacher and help her achieve victory. Faced with the unexpected request, Derek simply sighs. He admits there may be a way, but warns her about something first. Crossing her arms, she asks what the problem is. Derek asks if she truly understands the kind of training his students go through. A memory flashes through his mind. His former student lies injured on the ground after training, while he stands nearby holding a massive sword covered in blue magical energy. The redhead admits she does not know the details, but insists she is willing to do whatever it takes to win. Derek then raises a second concern. He reminds her that he makes a living as a mercenary. She dismisses the issue immediately, saying she does not care if people criticize her for hiring a commoner as her teacher. Looking directly at him, she reveals her dream of becoming the most famous mage in the empire. She argues that such an ambitious dream would be meaningless if she could not surpass the other nobles. Placing a hand on her chest, she asks not to be judged and says she understands what truly matters in life. Derek studies her determined expression without reacting. Then he casually points out that mercenaries require proper payment. The red-haired noblewoman freezes. Moments later, her face turns bright red with embarrassment as she finally understands what he means. Embarrassed but serious, she promises that she can pay whatever fee he demands. Blinking, Derek warns her that the training will be extremely demanding. Elsewhere, a blue-haired mage discusses an upcoming magic tournament with her friends. When the red-haired noblewoman hears about the event, she immediately decides to participate. One of the girls tells the blue-haired mage that she is being too modest about her abilities. When the rivals meet, the redhead gives her opponent a provocative smile. In her mind, she imagines boasting that the teacher her rival could not keep now belongs to her. The blue-haired mage looks slightly surprised. However, she simply congratulates her and says Derek must be an excellent teacher. She sincerely praises her rival once again. The redhead awkwardly thanks her, confused because the reaction is nothing like what she expected. The blue-haired mage quietly studies her opponent for a moment. She recalls a time when she suggested that her friend take additional lessons from Derek. In response, the blonde girl had panicked and begged her not to do such a thing. Back in the present, the blue-haired mage thoughtfully rests a hand on her chin. Meanwhile, the redhead convinces herself that her rival understands exactly what she meant. In her imagination, she proudly declares that she stole her rival's teacher. When the blue-haired mage attempts to talk about Derek, the redhead quickly changes the subject. With a smile, she says the conversation was enjoyable, but she needs to return to training. She leaves feeling victorious while her rival watches her go. The blue-haired mage eventually concludes that she should not take the situation too seriously. Derek would never do anything unreasonable. From a distance, a white-haired woman watches both noblewomen while drinking tea. She quietly reflects that everyone is simply pursuing their own goals. Meanwhile, life continues as usual at the Bannon Mercenary Tavern. Inside, the guild leader wonders why the number of jobs from the Belmont family keeps increasing. The white-haired mercenary casually replies that it is not a problem since he can complete the work without traveling. The older man then asks whether the young noblewoman truly has a chance of defeating her rival. With confidence, Derek answers that it is not impossible. He already has a plan. According to him, if she can break through to second-tier magic, they will have a real chance of winning the duel. The guild leader picks up a barrel and tells Derek to stop dreaming and explain his actual plan. With a serious expression, the young mercenary admits that this is exactly what he wanted to discuss and that he needs assistance. The older man looks confused and waits for an explanation. Derek reveals that, to guarantee everyone's safety, they will need Pelle's help. Still carrying the barrel, the guild leader remains silent while processing the information. Eventually, he accuses Derek of planning something reckless rather than sensible. The red-eyed mercenary admits that the plan is indeed dangerous. A memory flashes through his mind. Pelle is crying at the tavern counter, claiming that some swindlers tricked her and stole all her money. Despite thinking the plan is terrible, the guild leader finally agrees to help. That evening, training begins at the noble family's estate beneath an orange sunset. With her arms crossed, the young mage listens as Derek explains that their first lesson will involve real combat. After stretching, he says they will repeat the exercise 10 times to properly evaluate her magic. Before teaching her anything, he wants to see how she truly fights. The red-haired noblewoman remarks that his methods are brutal, but that is exactly why she hired him. Blue mana gathers around Derek's hand as he tells her to prepare herself. After the battle, the training grounds are left covered in cracks and destruction. The noblewoman drops to her knees, exhausted and completely out of breath. Derek thanks her for the effort and gives her only 10 minutes to recover. Shocked, she complains that she has no mana left. Coldly, he replies that if she pushes herself harder, she can still produce more. Criticizing her control, he orders her to create create 10 additional ice spears. When she struggles, he demands more and reminds her that she still has 5 remaining. As evening falls, he orders her to fire even more magical arrows. Collapsed on the ground, she insists she cannot continue. Only then does Derek tell her that dinner time has arrived. He asks whether she is alright and reminds her that she can quit whenever she wants. Furious, she jumps to her feet. She demands to know whether he has been trying to make her give up from the beginning. The redhead declares that he has no idea what she endured to reach this point and that this training is nothing compared to that. Derek admits that he may have underestimated her. Turning away, she says she is merely tired and promises to demonstrate her true abilities the next day. Smiling, she even asks for a tougher training session. Confused, Derek asks what she means by tomorrow's training. She stares at him in silence. He calmly explains that they are only taking a break for dinner. The atmosphere becomes awkward. She laughs and assumes he is joking. He is not. The following days continue the same way. Under the blazing sun, she trains relentlessly outside the estate. After struggling to create 5 magical arrows, Derek immediately demands 10 more. When she asks why the number keeps increasing, he orders her to keep going. They run laps together, and he warns her that if she stops, they will switch to mana control training. At one point, she collapses into a chair, exhausted and barely able to breathe. Derek asks whether she is alright. She forces a smile and claims she is having fun. Once again, he reminds her that she can quit whenever she wants. She confidently insists that the training is easy and that she will never give up. Derek simply watches her with an unreadable expression. Then he announces that her break is over and challenges her to another duel. 2 weeks pass. One afternoon, the exhausted noblewoman falls asleep at a table and asks her friend to wake her when her rival arrives. Resting her head on the table, she complains about how draining the training has become. Her white-haired friend asks why she is pushing herself so hard. After thinking for a moment, the young mage gives a simple answer: because she wants to win. The blue-eyed girl listens quietly before promising her full support. Suddenly, the white-haired friend notices a group of girls approaching. Among them is the redhead's rival. The arrival of Aileen is announced, causing the noblewoman to jump up in panic. The blue-haired mage approaches with her usual elegant and composed demeanor. Flustered, the redhead hurriedly fixes her hair and clothes. Her rival invites her to visit a new clothing shop, and she nervously agrees. After the group leaves, the red-haired mage hides her face behind her hands. She asks whether they are truly gone. Her friend confirms they are. Relieved, she asks if her rival saw her sleeping at the table. From a distance, the blue-haired mage glances back with a concerned expression. She notices how exhausted her rival looks and worries about her health. That evening, gray clouds cover the estate, creating a gloomy atmosphere. A maid informs the young noblewoman that a gift has arrived from the Duplan family. Inside a wooden box are flowers, magical potions, and a letter. The maid explains that the gifts came from Aileen and that the potions are intended to help restore mana. Although she praises their quality, the red-haired mage immediately orders everything to be thrown away. When the maid hesitates, she repeats the command more firmly. The servant obeys. While getting ready, the noblewoman asks where her teacher is. The maid replies that he has already arrived. Meanwhile, the letter is shown. Aileen wishes her a pleasant winter and explains that her family produced a large number of high-quality magical items this season. She says she is sharing them with fellow noblewomen and ends the letter by wishing everyone well. Outside, Derek waits patiently while reading a book. The noblewoman arrives earlier than expected. Noticing this, Derek comments on it, but she interrupts him. Instead, she asks what he thinks. Confused, he asks her to clarify. She wants to know how much progress she has made during the past few weeks. Derek remains silent for a moment before answering. Then, with complete seriousness, he says that giving up is also a valid strategy. The noblewoman freezes. Staring at him in disbelief, she accuses him of always knowing exactly how to irritate people. Derek briefly apologizes if his words sounded harsh. She immediately shouts that she was not asking whether she should quit. She wanted to know how she could defeat her rival. The redhead reminds him that she did not hire him just to hear that she should give up. Derek listens to her entire outburst without interrupting. Finally, frustrated, she tells him to leave if he intends to waste her time with useless advice. But he asks what is so wrong about simply losing the duel. The young man explains that her obsession with winning could end up hindering her growth. With tears in her eyes, the girl says that if she accepted defeat, she would look pathetic. The young mercenary remains silent as she begins to cry. She admits that she is used to speaking badly about her rival and that she is nothing like her. The mage describes herself as pathetic, jealous, and awful for feeling envy. The noble girl openly acknowledges all her flaws and admits how childish and pathetic she truly is. Trembling, she continues pouring out all of her frustrations. She knows she has no reason to hate Helene, yet she cannot overcome her inferiority complex. Crying, the young woman asks what is wrong with her, revealing how much she hates herself. In a memory, she insists that she is being sincere, even while exposing her greatest flaw. She has always carried a strange sense of self-hatred and asks what she must do to win. The young man realizes that this goes far beyond simple jealousy. The person the mage hates most is not her rival. Looking at her tear-covered face, he understands that the one she truly hates is herself. The mercenary realizes that this fight is not about petty envy. Victory is the only way she believes she can escape her self-hatred and inferiority complex. complex. He steps closer and firmly declares that they must win. With determination in his eyes, he promises that he will ensure her victory over her rival. The young mage looks at him with hope and agrees with his promise. Elsewhere, a carriage races across a vast field of golden wheat. The horse lets out a loud neigh before the carriage finally stops at its destination. An elderly man dressed in simple clothing steps out and announces their arrival. He has round glasses and a neatly groomed white mustache. The man stands before the enormous Bellmead family mansion, the home of the young mage. He is greeted by a red-haired nobleman who welcomes him back from Estine. The noble is Tristan Bellmead, the girl's father, and he invites the man to sit down. Tristan asks about his daughter, and the old man replies that she has been training diligently. Her father praises her talent and proudly states that she will surely surpass him one day. The elderly man agrees, but thinks it would be best not to reveal that her teacher is a commoner. Suddenly, the noble announces that he will soon have business in Eberstein, surprising the old man. He decides to visit his daughter personally and bring her a surprise gift. The old man nervously agrees, but worries whether that is truly a good idea. The scene shifts to a strange labyrinth near Estine beneath a full moon. Near the entrance, a man wearing leather boots admits that he is unsure about the plan. The group's leader, Belden, questions whether bringing a noble girl to such a place is wise. The mage is shocked by the idea, but the young man reassures her that the labyrinth is low level. Still hesitant, she asks what she is supposed to do inside such a dark place. The mercenary explains that she needs to sharpen her senses through real combat. As his hand glows, he reminds her that the duel is only a few days away and that she must train. He insists that when time is limited, this is the fastest way to improve. The young noblewoman is left speechless, staring at her teacher with wide eyes. The mercenary group enters the labyrinth, with their leader carrying a torch to light the way. The girl complains about the darkness and wonders what strange things might be lurking inside. The white-haired man tells her to stay alert because, although the place is easy, it is still dangerous. Frightened, the mage looks at her teacher with pure fear on her face. A blonde young woman with golden eyes carefully watches for any unusual movement. She warns the group that several goblins are approaching from the dark corridor ahead. The leader announces that there is also an ogre behind them, causing the noble girl to panic. He asks whether someone can handle an ogre, and the mercenary replies that it depends on the payment. The white-haired man cuts off the conversation, saying they can discuss money later. Suddenly, strange noises and eerie laughter echo through the labyrinth. Riva freezes in fear as she realizes she is standing before real monsters. With terrifying screams, the goblins charge forward with their spears ready. The white-haired young man leaps over the monsters and launches a counterattack. The noble girl watches with a pale face and mouth hanging open in shock and fear. With blue mana glowing from his sword, he asks P to cover him. He charges into the goblins, dodging their attacks with incredible speed and precision. The young archer prepares an arrow and takes aim to support her companion. The arrow strikes a goblin directly in the head, killing it instantly. Focused, the young man attacks with his magical sword. He slices a goblin in half with a single clean strike, displaying his skill. The mercenary then uses fire magic to burn his enemies while advancing through the corridor. The archer continues firing arrows with flawless accuracy. The young man's sword pierces another goblin's head with a swift and fatal strike. Another arrow hits a goblin directly in the eye, dropping it lifeless to the ground. The mage watches the battle with wide eyes and heavy breathing. A frightened scream escapes her lips when a monster suddenly appears before her. A gigantic ogre with glowing red eyes materializes in front of the group. The leader stares at the creature and casually asks how much money it is worth. The ogre roars furiously and prepares to attack. Swinging its massive club, it launches a devastating strike at the mercenary. The blow lands directly, creating a powerful impact. Meanwhile, one goblin is struck by a fireball and begins burning intensely. Another monster is hit in the neck by a precise arrow and falls dead. The young mage is horrified by the brutal way the monsters are being killed. With fear written across her pale face, she realizes that she could also lose her life in this place. A scream of pure terror echoes through the labyrinth as her panic grows. The young man shouts at her to pay attention and warns that one of the monsters is heading straight toward her. Then a goblin rushed straight toward her with a dagger. Terrified, she froze, convinced she was about to die. Derek shouted at her to fight back and kill the monster without hesitation. He told her to abandon the helpless attitude she had relied on until now. As the goblin closed in, memories flooded her mind. She remembered confessing how pathetic, jealous, and immature she felt. She thought about her inferiority complex, her arrogance, and how she had spent years looking down on others out of envy. The monster leaped to attack. At that moment, blue mana burst from her hand. With determination in her eyes, she formed a powerful mana blade. Facing the goblin, she decided that she would defeat it and become a better person. Derek watched silently, his expression serious. The young mage thrust the mana blade forward and pierced the goblin's chest with a precise strike, defeating it. The leader of the mercenary group watched the girl with clear surprise. The blonde archer was equally shocked by the noble's sudden action. The goblin's body fell to the ground, and the young mage stood there breathing heavily after her first kill. For a moment, she stared at what she had done. Then the shock faded, replaced by determination. She turned toward her teacher through the scattered bodies of the monsters. He met her gaze and calmly told her that this was only the first step. The girl shook her head and smiled. "No," she said. "I finally managed to take a step forward." The scene shifted to the labyrinth's exit, marking the end of their training. Sometime later, the young mercenary sat reading a letter. The sender apologized for contacting him after 2 years and explained that she had been busy teaching magic to a count's daughter. She fondly remembered the days they traveled together through Iblis and praised him as the most talented mage she had ever known. Sitting at her desk, she wondered how far he had progressed. The letter ended with a request to see his magic again when they met. It was signed by his former teacher, Katia Flameheart. Derek sat on a bench, rereading the letter. The noble girl approached and asked why he had been reading the same letter in the same spot for 2 weeks. He simply replied that it was from his former teacher. The girl smiled and commented that his teacher must be incredible to have trained someone like him. Derek remained silent for a moment before agreeing. He said she truly was an excellent teacher. Embarrassed by his serious answer, the girl laughed and asked him to forget her comment. Changing the subject, Derek asked how she felt about the duel, which was only 2 days away. She thought about it for a moment. At first, she wasn't sure how to answer. Then a confident smile appeared on her face. "I'll win," she said without hesitation. The day of the duel arrived, and the magical arena was packed with nobles. Among the spectators was her rival, chatting and laughing with her noble friends. Suddenly, her expression changed when she noticed someone entering the arena. Derek walked calmly through the crowd. Excusing herself, the dark-haired noble left her friends and approached him with a smile. She greeted him warmly and said she was happy to see him again. He replied that it had been a long time. She mentioned hearing rumors that he had been training Helenta in magic. Derek confirmed that their paths had crossed for a while. For a brief moment, they simply looked at each other. The girl smiled and remarked that he hadn't changed at all. She asked whether he had been especially strict with Helente, noting that she had heard he was far from an ordinary teacher. Derek's expression hardened. He told her she seemed too confident if she was worrying about her opponent instead of herself. Then he warned her never to lower her guard against anyone. The sudden seriousness left her speechless. Soon, the clear blue sky above the arena signaled the start of the event. Among the audience, 2 noblewomen discussed the match. One believed Aileen would win unless her opponent had hidden abilities. The other commented that Helenta looked exhausted and much thinner than before. A dark-haired noblewoman descended the arena stairs with elegance. The crowd cheered at the arrival of Lady Iseline, praising her beauty and grace. Elsewhere, another pair of footsteps approached the center of the arena. Helenta repeated to herself that she would win. She passed several spectators and walked toward her destiny with unwavering determination. From afar, Derek watched as she prepared for the greatest challenge of her life. Finally, the 2 young women stood face to face. Iseline greeted her politely and asked how she had been recently. Helenta forced a smile and replied that Iseline's calm attitude had always been inspiring. Then her expression changed. "Honestly, I'm not doing well," she admitted. "I've never been this nervous before a duel." With a challenging smile, she asked if they could finally begin. Iseline's expression turned serious. Helenta summoned powerful fire magic into her hands, while Iseline answered with equally strong water magic. The arena filled with magical energy as the 2 faced one another. Helenta released a massive amount of mana and formed fire runes. Iseline was visibly shocked by the sheer power. The runes transformed into dozens of flaming arrows and launched toward her in a massive assault. As Helente watched confidently, a memory surfaced. After exhausting training sessions in the labyrinth, she had once asked Derek how she could possibly win. He told her she had no chance of winning through skill alone. When she asked what was left, he answered, "Determination." He reminded her that he had trained her to use every last drop of mana. "The duel won't be decided by skill," he had said. "It will be decided by willpower." He instructed her to fight aggressively and make the battle last. Whoever had even a single drop of mana left at the end would win. When she worried that Iseline might possess more mana, Derek replied bluntly that if that happened, she would lose. Then he reminded her that the blood of the Belmiot family flowed through her veins. Back in the present, his final words echoed in her mind. "Believe in yourself." Iseline was stunned to realize Helenta had been hiding this level of power. A storm of flaming arrows rained from the sky toward her position. Despite the danger, she remained calm and raised a massive water barrier around herself. Fire collided with water, creating a cloud of steam that covered the battlefield. The audience was amazed by Helente's mana reserves, but Iseline remained protected inside her sphere of water. Analyzing the situation carefully, Iseline concluded that Helente would eventually exhaust her mana if she continued attacking recklessly. Then she noticed movement inside the steam. A smile appeared on her face. "Now it's my turn." She launched a single ice spear with perfect precision. Helente dodged at the last second, but somehow the spear still struck her right shoulder. Iseline immediately realized something was wrong. Helente had used illusion magic, sacrificing a large amount of mana to deceive her. The real Helente suddenly appeared behind her with an ice blade ready to strike. Iseline spun around in shock. The entire attack had been a trap, designed to create an opening from behind. In her memory, Derek's words resurfaced once more. "Your first attack will be blocked." He explains that his opponent would use an illusion to launch a close-range attack and deceive her. He warns that she is not an ordinary fighter and that a proper plan is necessary. Back in the present, Magu is caught off guard by an ice spear appearing right beside her. Her opponent suddenly emerges and launches the attack at point-blank range. Realizing she has no time to cast a defensive spell, the young mage reacts immediately. With a swift movement, her opponent grabs Magu's arm to prevent a counterattack. The red-haired mage is surprised but continues advancing with her blade. Her rival then forms a mana sphere in her free hand and launches a counterattack. A massive blue mana explosion sends both fighters flying backward. The red-haired mage lands safely by using an ice spear for support. Her opponent also lands without injury and faces her with determination. Sweating, the young noble realizes the fight is much harder than expected. Her rival is now fully focused and in a combat stance. The dark-haired girl admits to herself that she barely avoided disaster. She recalls her friend's warning never to lower her guard against an opponent. Now she finally understands what the young mercenary meant. The red-haired mage notices that her rival's abilities have completely changed. In response, her opponent decides to fight with her full power. She declares that she will rely on her fire magic and is confident in a battle of that kind. Ice spears begin emerging from the ground around her. Within seconds, countless spears float in the air, ready to strike. The audience is stunned by the number of spears created without any spell casting. From a distance, the mercenary watches calmly. Thinking his opponent has finally fallen into his trap, the red-haired mage remains alert to her rival's growing power. She acknowledges that the noble has improved greatly and refuses to underestimate her. With a quick motion, she launches a fire spell into the sky. A small sphere of bright light appears above the floating ice spears. The noble challenges her opponent to try blocking her next attack. Unfazed, the red-haired mage gathers flames in her hand and prepares her next move. She fires a single flaming arrow toward the sphere of light. The noble is shocked by the sudden action. The arrow rises through the sky and passes between the floating ice spears. She cannot understand how her opponent cast magic without any visible mana. Suddenly, she realizes the sphere of light was a trap hiding multiple fire arrows. The attack had been concealed for the perfect moment. The fire arrows begin raining down, and one strikes the ground near her. Smiling confidently, the red-haired mage points at her opponent. The noble admits she can no longer predict her rival's actions. In the audience, the white-haired girl praises the mage and is impressed by her performance. The red-haired mage believes she now controls the battle. However, Celine realizes she cannot win under these conditions. She admits her opponent is ahead in both strategy and boldness. Even so, she decides she must do something to turn the fight around. She resolves to change her strategy completely. Watching from afar, the white-haired young man states that the real battle is only beginning. At that moment, the pendant around Celine's neck shines with a blue light. An enormous amount of mana surrounds her, and her body begins floating. The red-haired mage is confused by what she sees. A powerful burst of energy erupts from Celine and pushes her backward. She wonders what kind of wind magic it is, since she cannot sense any mana. Then she realizes something is wrong with the mana around her. Suddenly, she can no longer sense any mana at all. The mercenary explains that for a brief moment, all mana in the area disappeared. This phenomenon is called mana alignment, which organizes all surrounding magical energy. It occurs when a mage uses mana far beyond their normal limits. As a result, the mana in the surrounding area aligns itself to compensate for the overwhelming power. In other words, Celine has surpassed her own limits. Empowered by this transformation, Celine faces her opponent with complete confidence. The fallen red-haired mage looks up and sees a massive second-tier fireball forming in the sky. She remembers a recent training session where she collapsed from exhaustion. Her friend approached and offered her water. While thanking him, she admitted she was unsure whether a few weeks of training would be enough to defeat Arklin. Confidently, he assured her she would win. Correcting himself, he said she would definitely succeed in the fight. Back in the present, the spectators are shocked by the attack's power. A gigantic second-tier fireball hangs in the sky, ready to strike. The red-haired mage panics and complains that her friend never warned her about this. She asks him what she should do, but the mercenary only watches silently with a serious expression. Frustrated, she yells at him to stop staring and say something. She then turns toward the approaching fireball. The massive attack descends at incredible speed. Desperate, she wonders how she can stop a second-tier spell. She briefly considers using an ice spear, but immediately realizes it would be useless. With her arm extended, Celine appears certain of victory. The red-haired mage thinks winning seems impossible. The girls in the audience watch in terror. The fireball is moments away from impact when the red-haired mage is blown backward by its force. However, the dark-haired noble notices something strange. A massive explosion erupts in the center of the arena. The red-haired mage is thrown away but manages to shield herself with her arms. The blast slams her violently across the arena floor. Breathing heavily after spending an enormous amount of mana, Celine is shocked to see her opponent land safely. She cannot understand how her rival avoided the attack. Then she realizes the red-haired mage used the same method she had used earlier. Sighing, Celine admits that a second-tier spell consumes a tremendous amount of mana. Her hand trembles slightly after channeling so much power into a single attack. Despite her exhaustion, she clenches her fist and remains determined to continue fighting. The young man explains that Aylin has recognized her opponent's efforts and is now fighting seriously. According to him, that is the proper way to show respect to a strong opponent. The red-haired mage returns the stare with equal determination. Aylin believes she understands her friend's plan and knows she must endure. With a serious expression, Aelin prepares another powerful fireball. She shouts that she will win the battle and launches the attack with all her strength, gritting her teeth as she struggles to control the immense power. She launches the fireball toward her opponent in the arena. The audience is shocked once again as another fireball is unleashed, this one faster and more powerful than the previous attack. The red-haired mage charges directly toward it. Instead of retreating, her opponent feels the pressure of the spell and tightly grips her own arm. As the fireball rushes forward, the mage runs to intercept it. With incredible agility, she leaps over the attack, flipping above the fireball while preparing a spell. Her body shines against the light, creating a striking silhouette. Selene looks up in shock and shields her eyes from the intense brightness. Suddenly, the young mage prepares a surprise counterattack. Holding an energy spear, she declares that her rival will not be able to predict its direction. She forms the spear and remarks that her opponent will only waste more mana trying to stop it. The red-haired mage throws the energy spear. On the ground, the dark-haired noble braces for impact. Selene quickly creates a massive ice barrier, but her opponent realizes it is not a defensive spell. Selene has simply run out of mana. The red-haired mage lands safely behind the shattered barrier. Sweating heavily, the young noble is exhausted and struggling to breathe. Watching from a distance, the mercenary calmly states that the battle will soon be over. Smiling, Alenta believes she has cornered her rival and that her opponent has no mana left. She is convinced that her remaining mana is enough to secure victory. To her surprise, however, a fireball emerges from the broken ice. The young mage is stunned. The fireball flies toward her as she collapses onto the arena floor. Completely drained of energy, the red-haired mage releases a small fireball and stares at her fallen opponent with determination. Lying behind the destroyed barrier, the noble desperately urges her body to move one last time. Gathering the little mana she has left, she struggles to continue. Her opponent watches silently, surprised by her persistence. The determination in her eyes makes it clear she refuses to give up. The red-haired mage recalls that no noble shines brighter than her rival, but where there is great light, there is always a shadow. Remembering her past, she reflects on how she always lived in her rival's shadow. The noble seemed born with every advantage and always received admiration from others. She remembers provoking her rival, hoping to make her angry and expose a flaw. Yet the noble only responded with a gentle smile. Her rival was like a jewel that shined brighter the more it was polished. That brilliance deepened her feelings of inferiority, dragging her into darkness, envy, and self-doubt. Even so, she continued training in secret, determined to become stronger. She promised herself that one day she would surpass her rival, prove her worth, and reveal her true strength. Back in the present, she looks at the fallen noble and thinks she is finally escaping that darkness. She admits that her opponent remains elegant and beautiful even now. Covered in mud with messy hair, the noble still carries herself with grace. The red-haired mage wonders how she remains so calm after everything that happened. Her rival never seems concerned with reputation or appearances. She always stays true to herself and gives her best in everything she does. The crowd begins cheering for Selene, urging her to stand and continue fighting. The red-haired mage creates a small flame in her hand for the finishing blow. She looks at her friend and remembers asking whether she could truly win. Seeing his confidence, she believes he is certain of her victory. In her mind, she sees the endless abyss of dark water once again. She thinks this is the end and that she will return to the darkness where she began. At that moment, the noble on the ground uses the last of her mana for one final attack. The spell fails, and she laments that her mana is completely depleted. The red-haired mage admits that she is also out of mana. Surprised by the confession, the young noble looks at her rival. Alente praises her and admits that she could not truly defeat her. The red-haired mage surrenders and says it was an incredible battle. The audience erupts in celebration for Selene's victory. The red-haired mage accepts the outcome with a faint smile, while her opponent looks confused by what just happened. Sometime later, both girls recover from the fight. Their friends congratulate Selene on her victory. Suddenly, the dark-haired girl notices her rival walking away alone, in silence. Nearby, the white-haired young man is reading a book when he sees the mage approaching. He asks if she saw everything and says that what happened was enough. Smiling, she asks whether he was shocked by her decision. He responds by asking what expression her opponent made. She answers that her rival looked completely stunned and ready to give up. She says that losing was worth it if it meant finally gaining an advantage over her rival. Then she asks whether he thinks she learns quickly. Suddenly, tears begin running down her face. Confused, she wonders why she is crying. The white-haired young man looks at her with understanding. Unable to hold back her emotions, she breaks down and cries. Sitting on the ground, she says she is too old to be crying like this. Her friend tells her there is nothing to criticize and reminds her how hard she worked. He remains silent as she continues crying. Through her tears, she admits that she wanted to win more than anything. However, she realized that even victory would not have solved the emptiness she felt inside. In her mind, she sees herself sinking into the abyss of darkness again. She confesses that this feeling is deeply rooted within her. The young man listens quietly as she speaks about her fears. She admits that even during the battle, her rival appeared more graceful than she did. Because of that, she says she may not be so different from him after all. He asks, "What's wrong with both of us being a little pathetic?" Surprised, she looks at him through her tears. He explains that if they are not willing to look pathetic sometimes, they will never grow. The mercenary comforts his friend as she continues crying on the ground. She remembers the abyss that once trapped her, but now it feels as if she can finally stand on solid ground again. Watching her rival walk away, she realizes that despite everything, she no longer feels trapped or hopeless. From afar, the white-haired girl notices the mage and the young man talking. After the battle, the girls say goodbye to Celine and thank her for the duel. One of them says the young noble gave an incredible performance and left everyone amazed. The white-haired girl asks whether her friend noticed it as well. With a serious expression, Celine admits that she was not the true winner. Her friend smiles knowingly and silently agrees. The dark-haired noble remains quiet, watching her rival from a distance. Celine's friend comments that she believes Celine is far more talented in magic, but the young noble disagrees. She insists that her rival surpassed her in every aspect and points out how much her abilities improved in such a short time. From afar, the white-haired young man observes the conversation carefully. A determined look appears in the noble's eyes as she reaches a decision. She calls her maid and asks her to come immediately. She explains that she needs to send an important letter to her family and states that she requires the mercenaries' help for something. In a luxurious mansion, a man reads a letter with a serious expression. He wonders why a 6th-level mage is heading to Eberstein. His assistant explains that the tariff agreement appears to have been moved forward. Since the man is a master of search magic, he feels he needs a valid reason to travel there. His son interrupts and presents a letter from his sister, Celine. In the letter, she requests a magic tutor, specifically the young man who trained her rival. The man considers sending a butler to negotiate aggressively, but his son volunteers to handle the matter personally. Since he already needs to travel to Eberstein, he decides to take care of it himself. Back at the mage's home, the sun sets on the horizon. The young mage tells the mercenary that she plans to take a break from training. The mercenary listens carefully, waiting for an explanation. She says she needs time to organize her thoughts. Then she asks whether he still intends to work with the mercenary group. Suddenly she steps on his foot, leaving him confused. Smiling, she asks if he would return if she called him back to teach her magic. The young man remains silent for a moment before answering. He says he would, although he is not sure he still has anything left to teach her. The mage laughs and tells him not to be modest because it does not suit him. With a sigh, she remarks that winter is finally coming to an end. Later that night, the young man returns to the mercenary's tavern. As he enters, a blonde girl notices him and is surprised by his sudden arrival. She calls out his name and runs over with a smile. The white-haired young man smiles back and says he is finally home. Meanwhile, a carriage races along a road under a clear blue sky. Inside, a red-haired man watches the scenery, eager to reach his destination. That night, the young mage sleeps peacefully in her large bed. Half asleep, she mutters that she is on vacation and does not want any more lessons. Her maid apologizes, but insists she needs to come see someone. The sleepy girl gets up, complaining that she told everyone to say she was unavailable. She wonders who could possibly be visiting at such an hour. Suddenly, a man greets her and remarks that it has been a long time. Standing at the door with her maid, he catches her completely off guard. Shocked, she asks why her father is there. Nervously, she greets him and asks him to wait a moment, but he ignores her request and enters the room, affectionately calling her his precious jewel. The next morning, father and daughter share breakfast together. He comments that a noblewoman from the Play family would never be an easy opponent. She agrees and says she learned a great deal from the battle. Smiling, her father suggests they should keep the mercenary at their estate. The mage looks concerned and points out that others would oppose the idea, but her father laughs and tells her not to worry. His reassurance leaves her feeling relieved. Elsewhere, the mercenary and his blonde companion explore an ancient dungeon. A strange energy emanates from deep within the dark structure. The blonde girl suddenly warns him that a monster is approaching from behind. Without even turning around, the young man prepares to attack. Red energy gathers in his hand as he begins casting a spell. His eyes light up as he senses a familiar energy within the dungeon. He unleashes a powerful fire spell against the goblin. The 3rd-level magic instantly incinerates the monster. He explains that the spell is called Firewall. A massive explosion of flames completely destroys the creature. The blonde girl shouts his name in panic as the blast echoes through the area. Birds scatter into the sky while smoke rises from the dungeon entrance beneath the setting sun. Back at the tavern, the blonde girl complains that her friend nearly got himself killed. Frustrated, she remarks that all mages seem to act the same way. The young man explains that he sensed a strange inconsistency during the fight. He says there is no need to force growth by repeatedly hitting a wall. He recalls his master's teachings that the wild school follows a more natural flow of development. His master always advised him not to force things. An old hooded man nearby comments that such advice rarely works on mages. The mercenary studies him carefully and notes that he cannot sense any mana coming from it. The man introduces himself as Dress and asks for a drink to ease his fatigue. Later that night, beneath a full moon, the blonde girl trains alone in an empty courtyard. She focuses and gathers mana around her. Concentrating intensely, she creates a blue energy arrow and fires it with precision. Grinding her teeth, she struggles to maintain control of the spell. 2 more energy arrows appear around her. She attempts to keep them stable, but one explodes nearby, knocking her to the ground. Frustrated, she shouts that the training is incredibly annoying. The young man approaches and comments that she has grown stronger, although her temper remains unchanged. He praises her her for successfully summoning 5 arrows and asks about her teacher. The blonde girl insists that all the credit belongs to her and claims her arrogant friend did not help at all. The young man then reveals that Exelin wants to hire that friend as a tutor. He also mentions that the blonde girl's rival is interested in hiring him as well. Annoyed, she wonders why that guy is suddenly so popular. Laughing, the young man replies that turning a spoiled brat into a respectable person tends to attract attention. He suggests that it would be better if his friend chose her instead. The young man believes that this way she might be able to see him again someday. Blushing, the girl denies that she misses him. Meanwhile, rumors about the mercenary continue to spread. The white-haired girl hopes no more competitors will appear. Back at the tavern, the young mercenary and the mage talk alone. The old man drinks a mug of beer while the young man silently watches him. He wonders why a mage of such caliber would be in a place like this. The mage suddenly asks if his name is Dirk, smiling as he does. The young man confirms it and wonders how the old man knows his name. The mage then invites him to a private conversation about an important matter. After a brief silence, Dirk accepts. As night slowly falls, the two walk through the city streets. The mage tells him that his magical talent lacks a clear focus, but praises his abilities, calling them exceptional. He asks why Dirk works so hard and what he hopes to achieve. Dirk replies that he has no grand ambitions and simply wants to see how far he can go. He is curious about the limits of his own growth. The old man looks at him seriously with a faint smile and says that he has the potential to reach even greater heights. The mage then offers to guide him on his journey. The young mercenary is shocked to learn that the old man is a 6th-tier mage. According to legend, the mage was born a commoner and eventually became a pillar of support for everyone. However, one rainy night, he returned home and found his entire family dead inside their house. The sight left the young mage completely horrified. Elsewhere, 2 nobles discuss whether the mage has finally calmed down. They mock common-born mages and wonder why they are always so greedy. One noble claims that if the mage appears again, they will deal with him. His expression makes it clear that he intends to eliminate the mage. Suddenly, a hooded man appears and attacks without hesitation. The hooded figure reveals himself as Dress and swiftly strikes the other noble, sending him flying. His blade cuts through the air and slashes the noble across the neck. The wounded man falls to the ground and desperately begs for mercy. As he crawls away and pleads for forgiveness, the mage approaches and ends his life with a single, merciless blow. After that incident, Dress spent 30 years fleeing from the imperial family and the nobility. When he finally reached the rank of 6th-tier mage, the imperial family realized he had become too powerful to oppose. To protect themselves, they granted him a noble title. Sindra became a noble solely through his magical talent and strength. The young mercenary sees no reason to refuse the offer and accepts the proposal of the 6th-tier mage. Meanwhile, 3 nobles gather in a conference room to discuss expansion into the peninsula and the dangers involved. One noble offers to send his knight order to assist, but another mocks him and asks whether he means mercenaries instead. The white-haired noble responds with open disdain, saying it must be difficult managing a territory with a private army. The discussion grows tense until another noble changes the subject and suggests talking about their children. He mentions hearing that the other's daughter can fight on equal terms with Estelin. The man smiles and says that despite previous setbacks, his daughter has finally blossomed. With a proper instructor, he believes she will soon surpass Celine. Another noble brings up Derek and claims to have a better plan. He argues that if Derek becomes Dissel's instructor, Elenta will never surpass her. Angered by the suggestion, the mage's father insists that the bond between Derek and his daughter is too strong for that to happen. The third noble wonders who this Derek is and why everyone is competing for him. In her room, the white-haired young lady decides to investigate him. Back at the tavern, the mage's father visits the mercenary commander. The commander welcomes him with a smile, though he appears nervous about the unexpected visit. The noble asks if he is the commander of the mercenary corps. As they talk over drinks, the noble explains that he came personally because his letter received no reply. The commander apologizes and reveals that Dirk has been missing for days. He explains that the young man rejected every request and disappeared without leaving any trace. The noble wonders if one of his rivals has already recruited him as a tutor and decides he will have to find the young man himself. Elsewhere, the white-haired girl sits in her mansion eating an apple while reading a letter. Focused on its contents, she asks her maid when the patriarch's letter arrived. The letter orders her to find Dick and make him her instructor as quickly as possible. With a sigh, she complains that the task is annoying and has ruined an important day. Taking off her glasses, she laments that she had been looking forward to this day for a long time because the newest book by her favorite author had finally been released. Smiling, she wonders about the meaning behind the title, The Great Ice Sword and the Demon King. Nevertheless, she decides to obey the order to avoid being lectured. She calls for her maid, prepares to leave the mansion, and declares that she is going to find someone. Later, Denise and her maid walk through a dark cave when they spot Derek's silhouette ahead. The white-haired girl hesitates for a moment before asking if he is truly the famous mercenary Derek. The white-haired young man calmly turns around and confirms that the name is indeed his. A subtle smile appears on the girl's face as she realizes she has finally found the person she had been searching for. Holding the edges of her dress, she admits that she came all the way to that remote place just to meet him. The noblewoman explains that she wanted the chance to speak with him at least once, even if only briefly. Derek simply watches her with a calm and unreadable expression, showing no immediate reaction. He then remarks sarcastically that they have already had a pleasant conversation so far. Hearing his tone, the maid struggles not to laugh while Denise pretends to remain unaffected. Internally, however, she is furious at the mockery and forces herself to keep smiling. Taking a deep breath, she decides to reveal the reason behind her search. She tells him that he keeps appearing in her dreams and that she has heard countless stories about his reputation as a magical instructor. With dramatic enthusiasm, she claims she would be incredibly happy if she could study magic under his guidance. Derek asks whether she is rehearsing for a stage play, commenting on the excellent acoustics of the cave. The maid covers her mouth to suppress her laughter while Denise grows increasingly frustrated. Unable to hold back any longer, Bella bursts out laughing at yet another rejection her mistress has received. Realizing that acting like a shy beauty is not working, Denise immediately changes tactics. She reveals that watching the duels of the other young women deeply affected her and made her feel left behind. She admits that she is terrified of stagnating while everyone around her continues to improve. Trying to appear vulnerable, she grabs Derek's hands and desperately begs for his help. She believes that such closeness will make it impossible for him to refuse. To her complete surprise, Derek calmly removes her hands and rejects the gesture without hesitation. Stunned, Denise cannot understand how he can dismiss her so easily. Derek tells her that he is not convinced and points out that she does not seem genuinely interested in studying magic. He reminds her of the ice spear spell she attempted to cast earlier, noting how unprepared and clumsy it was. He also points out that she barely trains her mana. In the background, the maid silently agrees with a nod. The young mercenary steps closer and offers her a piece of advice. He tells her never to deceive those who truly dedicate themselves to the path of magic. Denise is shocked to realize that he has completely seen through her act. Derek makes it clear that he does not accept requests from people who hide their true intentions behind lies. He suggests that she seek someone from her own social class instead of insisting on a mere mercenary. The young noblewoman can only watch silently as his figure disappears into the darkness of the cave. She remains frozen in place, struggling to process such a crushing rejection. Later that night, a large campfire illuminates the darkness of the forest camp. Bella notices her mistress sitting quietly inside the tent and asks whether she will be all right after everything that happened. Denise realizes that if she gives up now, another noble family will recruit Derek before she gets another chance. Although she knows she is being selfish, she asks her maid for one final favor. Smiling sweetly, she requests that Bella bring her the 4th volume of her favorite novel the next day. Bella can only stare at her with complete disbelief. The following morning, sunlight shines over the mountains and reveals the entrance of a mysterious cave. Inside, Derek sits quietly, concentrating on the flow of energy around him. Denise struggles through the cave carrying a heavy wooden box. It is filled with supplies including fresh bread, magical crystals, and several mysterious scrolls. Confused, Derek asks what the box is for. Denise smiles and explains that she wants to provide supplies so he can focus entirely on his training. He coldly informs her that none of this will change his decision. Denise replies that she does not mind and asks him to simply pretend she is not there. Secretly, she believes that people eventually soften when they receive enough attention and care. When Derek accepts the supplies, she celebrates internally, convinced that her plan is finally working. However, after taking a bite of the bread, he reminds her that accepting food does not mean he intends to become her instructor. The days pass. Denise returns repeatedly with more food and magical crystals, only to receive the same rejection every time. On the following day, she even brings the royal chef to prepare a feast, but Derek refuses again. Later, she struggles to deliver a massive and valuable piece of ore. Derek accepts the gift, yet his answer remains unchanged. He still refuses to become her instructor. Frustrated, the girl vents her anger by punching a tree trunk. She angrily complains about the mercenaries' greed for accepting gifts without showing gratitude. Suddenly, Bella rushes over with urgent news. The head butler of Plin's rival house is on his way to the cave. Panic-stricken, Denise orders them to hide behind nearby rocks. Elegant footsteps echo through the forest as a distinguished butler leads a group of armed soldiers toward the camp. Hidden behind a rock, Denise wonders if they are heading to war. The butler enters the cave with a woman to speak directly with Derek. Derek reads an offer to become Aislin's tutor and calmly remarks that it would be a great honor. Hearing this, Denise bites into a rock in frustration, while her maid struggles to stay quiet. The butler patiently waits for Derek's answer. Derek repeats that the invitation is a prestigious opportunity for his career. As Denise silently fumes, fearing her plans are falling apart, the butler asks if Derek is willing to leave immediately. Derek accepts the proposal without hesitation, shocking Denise. However, he adds one condition. He will only depart after completing his own mysterious training. The butler attempts to persuade him by offering even more money. Watching closely, Denise hopes Derek will refuse. He apologizes and declines the increased payment, explaining that he dislikes teaching magic unless he is fully prepared. Denise lowers her head, realizing how dedicated and respectful he truly is toward magic. Meanwhile, sunlight shines over the grand palace where another noble girl resides. Ayan celebrates upon learning that the mercenary has finally been located. Annoyed that she was not not informed sooner, she says she intended to invite him personally. She immediately orders the fastest escort to take her to the cave, insisting that a true student should personally seek out their master. As night falls, Denise and Bella sit by a campfire. Wrapped in her cloak, Denise reflects on everything she witnessed that day. Though exhausted, she remains determined. She tells Bella they will pack their belongings and return home the next morning. Surprised by her decision, Bella questions her, but Denise calmly explains that knowing when to retreat is a sign of intelligence. Gazing into the flames, she reflects on her ambitions. She jokes about whether Bella truly thinks she is foolish, and Bella quickly denies it. Denise admits that she is usually stubborn until she gets what she wants, but this time she has chosen a different approach. Hugging her knees, she confesses that she feels mentally exhausted. Bella agrees, and points out that the mercenary is not motivated by money or status. Instead, he seems driven by something he considers far more valuable. Denise falls silent, recalling how Derek refused to teach magic carelessly. She remembers both the red-haired girl and the other noble giving their all during the earlier duel. Watching the fire, she wonders why everyone around her seems so devoted to their chosen paths. Under the moonlight, she reflects on the sincerity that guides each of them. Elsewhere, inside the dark cave, small stones scattered across the ground suddenly begin floating. Derek is meditating, controlling mana to levitate them. Sensing someone's approach, he opens his eye, breaking his concentration and causing the stones to fall. Denise enters the cave and apologizes for interrupting his training. Smiling, she asks if she disturbed his focus and requests permission to sit beside him. Derek silently observes her. She comments that he seems different today, but he suggests it may simply be his tone of voice. Taking a deep breath, Denise sincerely apologizes for being so persistent and says she will stop bothering him about the matter. She thanks him for his attention and wishes him success in achieving his goals. Then she surprises him with a confession. She hates magic. Derek turns toward her, his red eyes showing mild curiosity. Denise explains that, in her experience, magic has always been tied to politics and appearances. Within her noble family, it was never about passion. She assumes Derek has little interest in political games and admits she would rather give up than watch him choose her rival. When Derek asks why she harbors so much resentment toward magic, Denise recalls her childhood. At first, she claims she enjoyed using her powers, but then corrects herself. The truth is that she loved the praise she received. Magic was simply a tool for gaining acceptance. She studied tirelessly while everyone called her a genius. Eventually, however, she began questioning why she was working so hard and what the ultimate purpose of it all was. Unable to find an answer, she abandoned her studies. Derek responds with understanding, noting that anyone would grow tired of receiving empty praise. Denise smiles slightly, realizing he genuinely listened to her heartfelt confession. Closing his eyes, Derek calmly wishes Denise and her companion a safe journey home. Denise pouts in a cute, frustrated way. Seeing that he still maintains his distant attitude, she slowly gets up to leave and quietly admits that she envies his personality. She says she admires people who never doubt the value of hard work and is certain that he will become a legendary mage. The young man silently watches her leave, saying nothing in response to her kind words. As she walks toward the cave exit, she asks him to at least greet her if they ever meet again. The next morning, the bright sun clears away the cold night mist. Aileen confidently leads her group of soldiers toward their destination. From a nearby hill, Denise and her maids silently watch the rival party approaching to meet the young mercenary. Before departing, Denise gives one last melancholic glance back, leaving both the forest and the mercenary behind with a quiet sigh. Sometime later, the luxurious Veltus family mansion stands beneath the clear afternoon sky. While Bella brushes her hair, Denise is surprised to learn that the rival noblewoman was also rejected by him. Reflecting on his words, she feels his explanation sounded more like a postponement than a permanent refusal. The maid advises her to forget about it for now, and the two joke about the old legends surrounding the young man. Denise pouts indignantly, wondering if he believes he is the only truly capable mage in the world. Suddenly, the mansion's butler enters and announces the arrival of a very special guest for dinner. The grand doors of the dining hall open, revealing the lavish room. Denise enters gracefully and greets her father with a warm smile. Her attention immediately falls on a very familiar figure seated across the table. Derek calmly eats a piece of meat, completely unfazed by her arrival. Denise is stunned to find the young mercenary comfortably dining beside her father. Maintaining proper etiquette, she greets her father politely while trying to understand how the mercenary ended up in her home. He continues eating calmly, ignoring her obvious surprise. The scene then shifts back to the previous night inside Dee's cave. The young mercenary is deep in meditation, surrounded by a powerful aura of mana. With his eyes closed, he struggles to control every drop of energy flowing through his body. His mana flow gradually aligns perfectly. Knowing success is within reach, he focuses on gathering and compressing the enormous amount of magical energy into a single focal point. Sweat runs down his face as he fights to maintain control. Suddenly, his red eye snaps open. He slams his hand into the stone floor, releasing all the concentrated mana in a single devastating strike. A massive blue explosion of mana erupts throughout the cave. The ceiling shakes violently, and sharp rocks begin falling from above. Derek remains kneeling amid the dust, gasping for breath after accomplishing the feet. Exhausted and drenched in sweat, he clutches his aching arm. He realizes that if he keeps pushing his body this hard, it may eventually break down. His master, Dressa, appears behind him and remarks that it would be a waste to die right after learning Gut. The old mage calmly announces that the time has finally come for him to lead. Derek proudly realizes he has successfully acquired the powerful level 3 skill. Later, fresh fish roast over a campfire. Sitting beside him, the old mage explains that he has nothing more to teach him about magic for now. He reminds Derek that no one survives in this dangerous world with mediocre talent and laziness alone. Handing him a fish, Dressa advises him to decide for himself how high he wants to climb on his journey. Curious, Derek asks where his master plans to go next. The old man replies that he simply intends to wander through the forest and enjoy some fresh air. He slowly walks into the dark forest trails, gradually disappearing into the cold night. Derek silently watches his master leave with respect. Before vanishing completely, the old mage gives one final warning. Be careful of a threat known as Quela. Once the old man is gone, Derek sits alone by the fire, seriously reflecting on the path ahead and repeating the mysterious name in his mind. The story returns to the present at the Veltus family palace. Denise's father happily states that his daughter's efforts brought an excellent instructor to their household. Denise humbly accepts the praise, saying she merely fulfilled her duty as the family's heir. Curious about why he rejected the rival group, the nobleman offers the mercenary any assistance he may need. The young man explains that he accepted the position because he was impressed by Denise's sincerity. The Duke proudly agrees, boasting that no one could possibly refuse the chance to teach his beloved daughter. He then begins recounting an embarrassing childhood story about Denise forgiving a servant with an angelic smile. Mortified, she quickly interrupts him and firmly changes the subject. With a forced smile, she suggests that it would be better to discuss the lessons privately with her new instructor. After her father leaves, the two young people are finally alone at the large dining table, sharing tea in silence. The mercenary asks if this is some kind of joke, but Denise innocently claims she is simply enjoying her tea. She reminds him of his cold words from their previous farewell and sarcastically comments on how quickly they met again. Finally, he sincerely thanks her for what she did in Lasma Cave and admits that he learned a great deal from her honest and genuine attitude. Denise crosses her arms and firmly repeats that she approached him purely for political reasons. Jarek takes a sip of tea and calmly admits that he disliked her attitude. He explains that what bothered him most was her judgment of magic without truly understanding it. Denise remains silent, meeting his gaze with a serious expression as she listens to his blunt criticism. She acknowledges that he would find her opinion offensive, but proudly insists that she still has every right to hate magic. She quietly remarks that their entire conflict is ultimately a shame. Derek replies that it is unfortunate to harbor resentment towards something without experiencing the true wonders of magic. His red eye opens with intimidating intensity as he firmly states that he cannot tolerate such thinking. Startled, Denise instinctively leans back in her chair as a threatening aura surrounds him. She realizes that his reaction borders on obsession and understands she has touched a sensitive subject. The scene shifts to Aileen's beautiful noble district palace beneath a clear, sunny sky. Sitting alone in her luxurious room, she stares thoughtfully out the large window. Her expression is lonely and saddened as she reflects on recent events. She remembers visiting the mercenaries' cave with her royal guards to recruit him. At the time, he had bluntly told her that he had nothing left to teach her. He explained that her magical foundations were already solid and that she would benefit more from a tutor who shared her magical doctrine. After formally apologizing, Derek made it clear that he would not become her instructor. Aileen had been left speechless by the unexpected rejection. Lowering her head in disappointment, she regretted losing the opportunity to hire the tutor she wanted most. Back in the present, she reflects on his words and realizes they were probably not intended as praise. Slowly approaching the window, she places her hand against the cold glass and gazes outside. She admits to herself that she has always followed rules and textbooks, believing that was all there was to magic. Reaching toward the sky, she bitterly realizes that she has spent her life confined and lacking true freedom. A knock at the door interrupts her thoughts. Her maid enters carrying an important letter from the family's main estate. Aileen is surprised to learn that Lord Valera's departure ceremony has already been scheduled for the following week. Realizing she needs an appropriate gift for his first journey to the frontier, she decides to personally visit the commercial district to buy one. Suddenly, a loud crack startles her. One of the wooden legs of her blue chair unexpectedly breaks, causing it to topple onto the floor. The incident leaves behind a strange and mysterious atmosphere. The scene shifts to Denise's palace under a starry night sky. Lying on her bed, Denise complains that the mercenary must be crazy for getting angry while defending magic from her criticism. She continues venting, wondering why he insists on forcing his love of magic onto others. Bella smirks and sarcastically suggests that her mistress should stop forcing cheap romance novels onto her as well. Denise immediately sits up and passionately defends her beloved romance books, declaring that failing to appreciate their beauty is unforgivable. Bella sighs and patiently repeats that she simply does not enjoy those stories. Denise quickly tries to justify herself. Lying on her side, Denise begins seriously considering the worst possible outcome of hiring the mercenary as her instructor. Bella advises her to go to sleep and get some rest, but Denise insists on sharing one final theory. She admits that if she fails to improve despite having such an incredible teacher, she will look completely useless. Pulling the blanket over herself, Denise grumbles that she would rather spend her days lying in bed reading romance novels. Bella warns that her allowance for buying books will be cut off if she fires her instructor. After saying that, the maid leaves the room. Silence fills the bedroom as Denise remains hidden beneath the covers. Trying to fall asleep, she tosses and turns in frustration, letting out muffled groans. Eventually, she peeks only the top of her head out from under the blanket and stares silently into the darkness. With an unhappy sigh, Denise admits to herself that the entire situation has completely robbed her of her peace of mind.